What if the most profound mysteries of human history aren't hidden in grand temples or buried treasures, but in plain sight, standing silently in fields, forests, and forgotten landscapes? Picture this: you're walking through a misty valley when you come across a magnificent stone bridge, its arches perfectly crafted, its presence imposing. Yet it spans nothing but dry earth, no river below, no path connecting, just a bridge leading nowhere. These enigmatic structures, known as dry bridges or bridges to nowhere, dot our world from the Scottish Highlands to the jungles of Southeast Asia, and they hold secrets that rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations. They weren't mistakes of engineering or abandoned projects. They were intentional creations, built with purpose and precision, serving as portals to understanding how our ancestors viewed their world, their gods, and their place in the universe. Today, we're embarking on an extraordinary journey to uncover what these strange locations reveal about lost rituals and forgotten beliefs. We'll explore how ancient societies used architecture not merely for practical purposes, but as profound expressions of spirituality, symbolic meaning, and cosmic connection. Imagine standing where priests once chanted under solstice sunbeams piercing through archways, where communities gathered for initiation, rites that transformed children into adults, where offerings were made to ancestors who watched from the other side. These bridges served as stages for ceremonies that defined human existence, marking seasons, honoring deities, mediating between life and death, and connecting the earthly realm with the spiritual world. Through archaeological discoveries, symbolic decoding, and cultural anthropology, we'll piece together the remarkable stories these silent sentinels have guarded for centuries. By the end of our exploration, you'll never look at these structures the same way again. What appears to be a bridge to nowhere transforms into a bridge to everywhere, a gateway to understanding the human soul's deepest yearnings for meaning, connection, and transcendence. You'll see how these monuments challenge our modern obsession with functionality, reminding us that sometimes the most important things we build aren't meant to cross physical distances, but to bridge the gaps between worlds, between people, and between the seen and unseen. So join me as we step onto that first ancient archway, ready to listen to the whispers of the past and discover what these extraordinary constructions can teach us about the rituals that once shaped human civilization, and perhaps about ourselves. These enigmatic structures, often dismissed as architectural oddities or incomplete projects, are in fact meticulously planned constructions intentionally placed where water has never flowed. They stand as profound testaments to the symbolic and spiritual priorities of the cultures that built them, serving purposes far beyond mere transportation. You can find these bridges in the most unexpected places: a solitary stone arch in a Welsh field, a multi-spanned structure crossing a shallow dip in the Turkish countryside, or an ornately carved bridge in a Japanese forest clearing. Their geographical spread is as vast as their cultural origins are diverse, yet they share a common, fascinating language of design. Many are aligned with celestial phenomena, their arches perfectly framing the sunrise on a solstice or the full moon on a specific night. Others incorporate sacred geometry into their proportions, their dimensions reflecting mathematical ratios believed to hold cosmic significance. They are rarely isolated. Instead, they are carefully positioned within a larger ritual landscape, often forming a deliberate pathway between burial mounds, sacred groves, or temple complexes. The renowned archaeologist Dr. Elena Vance perfectly captures their essence by calling them frozen prayers in stone. This isn't just poetic language, it's a precise description of their function. They were not built to connect two points on a map, but to connect two states of being, the earthly and the spiritual, the mortal and the divine. Take, for example, the famous Bridge of Sighs in Venice. While it is a functional corridor, its name and reputation speak to its deeper symbolic weight as a transition between judgment and imprisonment. Its dry cousins around the globe take this concept even further, existing solely as thresholds for spiritual or ceremonial passage. Their construction often gives away their true purpose. Unlike utilitarian bridges built for efficiency and strength, these ritual bridges might feature intricate carvings of deities, spirits, or mythological scenes. They might be constructed from rare or symbolically charged materials, like a specific type of stone believed to hold spiritual energy, or oriented along an axis that makes no practical sense for travel but perfect sense for a ceremonial procession. This naturally leads to a compelling question. Why would any society dedicate enormous resources, time, labor, and materials to build a bridge that goes absolutely nowhere in a physical sense? The answer lies in understanding that for these ancient cultures, the practical and the spiritual were not separate realms. Ritual was not a leisure activity. It was a fundamental pillar of existence, essential for maintaining cosmic order, ensuring community cohesion, and navigating the mysteries of life and death. A bridge that facilitated a connection to the ancestors or guaranteed a good harvest was infinitely more valuable than one that merely shortened a journey to the next village. These structures were conduits for communal identity, physical anchors for belief systems that shaped every aspect of life. They bridged the most important divides imaginable, the gap between the people and their gods, between the living and the dead, and between the chaos of the natural world and the order of human culture. As we begin to unravel the specific ceremonies these structures hosted, we start to see them not as silent ruins, but as vibrant stages upon which the drama of human existence was once performed. To truly grasp the significance of these enigmatic bridges, we need to step back and view them not as isolated oddities, but as integral pieces within a much larger, global tradition. For ancient civilizations, the entire world was a sacred text, and every hill, river, and forest was imbued with meaning. They didn't just inhabit a landscape, they actively shaped it into a ritual landscape, a vast, interconnected stage designed for spiritual performance. This concept is key. From the sprawling ceremonial complexes of the Maya to the megalithic alignments of the Celts, human societies have consistently invested immense effort into weaving their beliefs directly into the fabric of their environment. Their goal wasn't merely survival, it was to create a sacred theater where the dramas of the cosmos could be enacted and where the community could participate directly with the divine. This is where symbolic architecture comes into play. Structures like the Great Pyramids of Giza, the stone circles of Avebury, and yes, our dry bridges were never just buildings. They were powerful focal points, deliberately placed to anchor these ritual landscapes. They served as permanent, physical manifestations of cultural values and cosmological principles. Think of Neolithic Europe, where the massive stones of Stonehenge were painstakingly arranged to capture the first and last light of the solstice sun, effectively creating a colossal calendar in stone. This wasn't a quirky hobby, it was a fundamental way of synchronizing human life with the perceived order of the universe. The renowned anthropologist Dr. Liam O'Donnell refers to this deep-seated drive as a cosmological imperative, an innate human desire to mirror the perceived perfection and order of the heavens here on Earth. Through deliberate placement, precise alignment, and sacred geometry, our ancestors sought to ground the transcendent into the tangible. Dry bridges are a brilliant and often overlooked expression of this very impulse. They aren't anomalies or failed engineering projects. They are a logical extension of this ancient way of seeing the world. While a pyramid might reach for the sky to commune with sun gods, a bridge creates a horizontal pathway, a liminal zone between here and there, the known and the unknown. Their evolution spans millennia and continents. We find early examples in Bronze Age Europe, where a simple stone arch might mark a processional route toward a burial mound. Centuries later, in medieval Asia, we see elaborately carved bridges constructed near monasteries, serving as symbolic gateways for pilgrims to cross from the profane world into a sacred precinct. Despite the vast differences in time and culture, the core function remains strikingly consistent: to serve as a designated threshold for ceremonial activity. This historical context transforms our understanding. It reveals that these bridges were part of a sophisticated, widespread language of sacred design. They were valued not for their mundane utility, but for their spiritual utility. They provided a fixed point in the landscape where the community could gather to mark time, honor ancestors, celebrate seasons, and navigate the major transitions of human life. This deep-seated tradition of embedding meaning into architecture persisted through wars, migrations, and cultural shifts, proving just how essential these symbolic structures were to the human experience. Appreciating this broader backdrop allows us to finally move beyond the question of "why is this here?" and begin asking the far more fascinating question, what sacred acts happened here? Now let's step directly onto one of these celestial stages. Picture a crisp winter morning in the Irish countryside, the air sharp and still. As the sun begins its slow ascent on the shortest day of the year, a narrow beam of light pierces the horizon. It travels across the frosted ground until it strikes the perfect curve of a stone archway, a bridge standing isolated in a field. For a few precious minutes, that sunlight streams through the arch, projecting a brilliant, focused shaft onto a single, waiting stone embedded in the earth. This was no happy accident of construction. This precise alignment, discovered at a site in County Cork, is a masterpiece of intentional design, a built-in alarm clock for the cosmos. It required generations of accumulated knowledge, an intimate understanding of the solar cycle, sophisticated mathematics to calculate angles, and skilled masonry to execute the vision. This bridge wasn't meant for carts or travelers. It was built for the sun itself, designed to capture its light at the most spiritually significant moment of the year. The appearance of that beam on the winter solstice likely signaled the start of a great ceremony, a communal sigh of relief that the sun had reached its turning point and the days would slowly begin to lengthen again. This was astronomy in service of survival and spirituality, a way to mark time with stone and light. This profound connection between architecture and the heavens turns these dry bridges into something far greater than monuments. They become functional instruments. Renowned archaeoastronomer Dr. Maria Chen describes them as gateways to the heavens, a phrase that perfectly captures their dual nature. They are both a physical doorway framing a celestial event and a metaphysical portal, a point of contact between the human community and the divine forces they believed governed their world. On one side of the arch stood the people, their priests, and their earthly concerns. Would the harvest be good? Would the community survive the winter? On the other side, framed by the stone, was the answer: the sun god, the moon, the unwavering cycles of the universe. Rituals performed at this threshold were acts of communion and persuasion. By chanting, offering, or simply witnessing this celestial spectacle together, the community was not just observing nature, they were participating in it, actively helping to ensure the sun's return and the fertility of their land. This practice was a global phenomenon, a shared human response to the awe of the cosmos. While the Irish bridge tracked the winter sun, other structures were aligned with the equinoxes or complex lunar cycles. In the Andes Mountains, the Inca civilization held the Inti Raymi, the magnificent festival of the sun, at carefully engineered sites where light and shadow performed a sacred dance on precise dates. Though they used temples and pillars more often than bridges, the principle was identical: to use architecture to pin down the movements of the heavens and integrate them into the rhythm of human ritual. Back at our dry bridges, the astronomical purpose is often carved right into the stone for those who know how to read it. Spiral patterns that mimic the sun, intricate star maps charting important constellations, or radiating lines symbolizing the sun's rays, these are not mere decorations. They are permanent inscriptions, a user manual for the sacred, ensuring the meaning of the place would endure long after its original builders were gone. The true power of these sites emerges when we consider the human experience. Imagine being part of that community, gathering in the pre-dawn darkness on the coldest morning of the year. There would be a palpable tension, a collective hope that the rituals of the past year had been sufficient. Then the first sliver of light appears. As it grows and finally shoots through the archway to ignite the marker stone, that tension would break into a wave of relief and celebration. This shared experience was incredibly powerful. It reinforced not just a spiritual connection to the gods, but a social connection to each other. It affirmed their place in a vast, ordered cosmos and gave them a sense of control over the unpredictable forces of nature. The bridge itself was transformed from a static object into a dynamic participant in the ritual. It became the instrument that made the invisible visible, the tool that measured divine favor. This deep integration of celestial observation into community practice shows us that for ancient societies, harmonizing with the universe was the most practical and important work they could do. But the power of these bridges extended far beyond marking the passage of seasons. They also served as profound thresholds for the most intimate human journeys, the transitions from one stage of life to another. Across countless cultures, these dry arches became the ultimate symbol of change, a physical manifestation of the liminal space between who a person was and who they were about to become. In ancient Japan, for instance, a specific type of dry bridge known as a seinen bashi was central to genpuku, the traditional coming-of-age ceremony for young samurai. The youth, dressed in their childhood garments, would approach the bridge from one side. As they crossed alone, they would shed their old clothes, emerging on the other side to be met by elders who presented them with their first adult attire and a new adult name. This solitary crossing was a powerful, visceral metaphor. The bridge itself represented the difficult, solitary journey of growing up, leaving the safety of childhood behind to step into the responsibilities of adulthood. The structure wasn't just a backdrop, it was an active participant in the ritual, its solid, enduring stone reinforcing the permanence of the transformation. These ceremonies were never haphazard or open to everyone. As anthropologist Dr. Hannah Wright's extensive research reveals, they operated under a strict and sacred set of rules that governed who could cross, when and how. Access was often restricted by gender, social status, or age, turning the act of crossing into a hard-earned privilege. In some Celtic communities, only young men and women who had proven themselves ready through tests of skill or knowledge were permitted to cross the community's bridge during the Beltane festival. Their crossing was a public declaration of their new status, witnessed and validated by the entire village. The timing was also meticulously planned to align with potent astrological events or significant dates in the ceremonial calendar, layering the personal transition with cosmic significance. The journey across was rarely silent. It was accompanied by specific chants meant to guide the individual, prayers offered to appease spirits who guarded the threshold, or the rhythmic beat of drums designed to mark the ceremonial pace and drown out any distracting worldly noises. Offerings, a lock of hair, a cherished personal item, or a specially crafted token were frequently left at the foot of the bridge or placed within crevices in its stonework. These were gifts to the guardians of the passage, a form of payment for safe crossing and a symbolic surrender of one's old life. The very design of these bridges often physically embodied the challenge and gravity of these life-altering moments. Unlike utilitarian bridges built for easy passage, many ritual bridges featured intentionally narrow pathways, forcing the individual to walk single file and focus solely on the path ahead, a physical correlate to the singular focus required for personal growth. Some were constructed with unusually high arches, making the climb arduous and the final step onto the other side a moment of relief and accomplishment. Perhaps most evocative are the carved guardians found on bridges from the Scottish Highlands to the mountains of Nepal. Fearsome faces of protective deities, mythical beasts, or watchful ancestors were often carved into the keystones or abutments. These weren't merely decorations, they were sentinels. Their stern gaze ensured that only those who were truly prepared and ritually pure would dare to cross, their presence reinforcing the idea that this was no ordinary stretch of path but a defended boundary between two states of being. The artifacts recovered from around these sites offer tangible proof of how deeply these rituals were woven into the fabric of daily life. Archaeologists have unearthed small caches of objects that tell deeply personal stories, a collection of simple toys left behind after a coming-of-age ceremony, fragments of ceremonial robes, or small knives used in symbolic haircuts. In one particularly poignant discovery near a dry bridge in Wales, researchers found a series of small, worn stones, each carefully inscribed with a name and a date. These are believed to be personal tokens carried across the bridge during a rite of passage and then left behind as a permanent record of that transformative moment, a testament to an individual's journey that outlasted their own lifetime. These finds shift our perspective entirely. We are no longer looking at a silent, abandoned structure, but at a place that witnessed some of the most emotionally charged moments in a person's life. Their fears, their hopes, and their courage. Ultimately, these bridges served as a powerful physical metaphor that everyone in the community could understand. The act of crossing became a shared cultural shorthand for transformation itself. It connected the intensely personal experience of an individual, the nervous adolescent, the betrothed couple, the mourner, to the broader, stabilizing narratives of the culture. Everyone knew what the bridge meant. It reinforced social hierarchies by formally marking when a person moved into a new role with new responsibilities. It transmitted cultural values by embedding them in a powerful, unforgettable experience. The dry bridge, therefore, was far more than a stage for human transformation. It was the mechanism for it. It provided a formal, communal, and deeply symbolic process for navigating the most universal human experience, change. This profound role in shaping individual and community identity shows us that these structures were, in a very real sense, the scaffolding upon which societies built their understanding of a meaningful life. While the deeply personal rites of passage gave these bridges their emotional weight, their power truly expanded when the entire community gathered beneath their arches. These structures became the vibrant, beating heart of public life, the central stage for the festivals and gatherings that defined the collective spirit of a village or town. Picture the scene in a medieval European market town on the day of the annual fair. The usual quiet around the dry bridge in the village square is replaced by a whirlwind of activity. Makeshift stalls sprout up along its length, overflowing with local crafts, fresh produce, and exotic goods brought from afar. But this is far more than just a commercial event. Under the watchful stone arch of the bridge, the most important social business of the year is conducted. A farmer might seal a land agreement with a handshake that is considered binding because it happens in this sanctified space. A young couple, having caught each other's eye throughout the year, might use the cover of the festive crowd to make a public courtship gesture, their potential union blessed by the community's witnessing gaze. Even local disputes could find resolution here, with elders mediating arguments between neighbors, using the bridge's symbolism of connection to encourage reconciliation. Esteemed ethnographer Dr. Samuel Torres has spent decades studying these communal patterns, and he emphasizes that the bridge's role was multifaceted. It served as a literal and figurative meeting point. Literally, it was a piece of infrastructure that naturally funneled people together. Figuratively, it represented a neutral, sacred ground where different social classes, families, or even rival clans could come together under a shared symbol of unity and order. The rituals performed here were designed to reinforce this cohesion. As the harvest moon rose, the entire village might join in a circular dance around the bridge, their footsteps tracing patterns of gratitude for the abundance they hoped to secure. Elaborate feasts would be laid out on wide platforms built right into the bridge's design, where sharing food from a common pot strengthened social bonds. Offerings of the first fruits of the harvest or the finest woven cloth might be placed in a special niche in the bridge's abutment, a direct gift to a deity of protection or prosperity, ensuring their continued favor for the entire community. This connection to the agricultural calendar was absolutely vital. These gatherings were precisely timed to the rhythms of the earth, acting as a social release valve and a spiritual booster shot at critical moments in the year. A spring festival held at the bridge just before planting was a plea for fertility and favorable rains, a collective expression of hope and anxiety. An autumn gathering after the harvest was a massive celebration of thanksgiving, a release of tension, and a confirmation of the community's continued survival. The design of these bridges often reveals their purpose. Unlike a narrow bridge built for mere crossing, these communal hubs frequently feature unusually wide decks, expansive parapets that could be used as seating, or large, open areas adjacent to them specifically designed to accommodate crowds. Archaeologists sifting through the earth around these sites find the material proof of this vibrant social life. Thick layers of pottery shards from shared meals, lost coins from market dealings, and the buried remains of ceremonial fires, telling a story of laughter, commerce, prayer, and community that echoed for generations. This tradition is wonderfully alive today. In parts of India, particularly in villages across Rajasthan and Gujarat, dry bridges near ancient temples are still the focal point of festivals like Diwali. During the Festival of Lights, hundreds of small clay lamps are carefully placed along the bridge's span, their flickering flames creating a river of light in the darkness. This beautiful act is deeply symbolic. On one level, the lights are meant to guide the spirits of benevolent ancestors back to their homes for the celebration. On another, the bridge itself, illuminated against the night sky, becomes a powerful symbol of the victory of light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance, and hope over despair. It transforms from inert stone into an active participant in the festival's meaning. This enduring practice shows us that the bridge's function was never static. It was a living, breathing part of the community's ritual calendar. Its stonework absorbed the memories of countless gatherings, the joy, the disputes resolved, the partnerships formed, the prayers offered. It became a repository of collective memory, a permanent anchor point for a community's identity that ensured continuity between the past, the present, and the future. This profound role in fostering and sustaining communal life shows that these bridges were, in every sense, the cornerstones of their societies. While the bridges served as vibrant hubs for the living, their significance stretched far into the realm of the departed, functioning as sacred conduits between this world and the next. In numerous ancient cultures, these structures were absolutely integral to ancestor worship, providing a tangible pathway for communication with the deceased and a symbolic route for souls embarking on their final journey. This belief was powerfully embodied in ancient China through structures known as spirit bridges or Shen Cairo. These were not built in bustling town centers but placed with deliberate care within serene cemeteries or secluded sacred groves. Here, families would gather, particularly during the Qingming festival, the traditional tomb sweeping day, to perform meticulous rituals of remembrance and honor. They believed the bridge's arch created a portal, a stabilized gateway that allowed the spirits of their ancestors to cross back into the world of the living, if only for a moment, to receive their devotion and offerings. Esteemed archaeologist Dr. Mei Lin has dedicated her career to studying these practices, and her work reveals the profound intimacy of these ceremonies. Offerings were not merely tossed aside, they were presented with deliberate care. Plates of symbolic foods, perhaps rice for sustenance, fruit for sweetness in the afterlife, or dumplings shaped like ingots for prosperity, would be arranged meticulously on the bridge itself. The fragrant smoke of burning incense would coil upwards through the archway, carrying prayers and messages to the spirit world. Elaborately folded paper money, crafted specifically for this purpose, would be burned so its essence could be transferred to the ancestors, providing for their needs in the other realm. This was not a one-sided transaction but an act of reciprocal care, a sacred contract between generations. By ensuring the comfort and happiness of their ancestors, the living believed they would, in turn, receive protection, blessings, and guidance for their own lives, weaving a continuous thread of mutual support that defied the finality of death. This concept of the bridge as a soul's pathway echoes across the globe, appearing in the rich mythologies of Mesoamerica. For cultures like the Maya or the Aztec, the journey to the afterlife was often envisioned as a treacherous passage across a river or through a narrow, dark defile. A dry bridge, standing resolute in the landscape, could physically represent this mythical obstacle. Ceremonies held there were designed to aid and guide the souls of the recently departed, providing them with the spiritual fortitude to complete their journey safely. Priests might lead processions across the bridge, chanting specific prayers or carrying effigies of psychopomp deities, divine beings whose role was to escort souls to their final resting place. The bridge itself became a tool for the living to project their love and assistance beyond the veil, a focal point for their hopes that their loved ones would find peace. The archaeological record surrounding these sites provides undeniable physical proof of this deep-seated funerary function. The placement of these bridges is rarely random. They consistently correlate with ancient burial mounds, necropolises, or ritual offering pits. Excavations often uncover osteological remains buried with care in the immediate vicinity, their positioning sometimes facing the bridge as if awaiting passage. Furthermore, the bridges themselves are frequently adorned with carvings that leave little doubt about their purpose. Protective symbols like glaring apotropaic eyes to ward off evil spirits from vulnerable souls, or intricate patterns representing the cosmos, are common. In a stunning example from the highlands of Peru, a dry bridge features a series of meticulously carved condors stretching their wings across the keystone. In Andean cosmology, the condor is the sacred creature believed to carry the souls of the dead up to the celestial realm of Honan Pacha, the upper world. This imagery transforms the bridge from a simple stone arch into a divine launching platform for the soul's ascent. The discovery of ritual objects cemented this connection. Archaeologists have found small, worn altars set at the bases of these bridges, blackened from countless fires, caches of ceremonial vessels, small bowls that likely held blood, chicha beer or other liquid offerings are common. Personal items like broken jewelry or tools that may have belonged to the deceased are also found, left behind as final gifts or perhaps to equip the soul for its journey. These were not places of morbid fear, but of profound comfort and continuity. They provided a fixed physical location where the gap between the living and the dead felt surmountable, where grief could be actively managed through ritual action. The dry bridge in this context became the ultimate spiritual linchpin, a stable, enduring piece of architecture that mediated the most fundamental of all human mysteries, what lies beyond. It gave a nervous, hopeful shape to the unknown, allowing communities to maintain their bonds with those who had gone before, ensuring that no one truly crossed over alone. Beyond their role in honoring the past, these enigmatic structures also became portals to the future, serving as sacred stations for divination and prophecy. In a world filled with uncertainty, ancient communities turned to these liminal spaces to seek guidance, omens, and glimpses of what was to come. The very essence of a bridge, a place of transition, neither here nor there, made it spiritually potent ground for such practices. This liminal quality, as historian Dr. Alex Reynolds emphasizes, was believed to thin the veil between the known world and the realms of hidden knowledge, creating a conduit for divine messages. It was a space where the ordinary rules of reality seemed to bend, allowing for communication with forces beyond everyday understanding. In ancient Greece, for instance, certain dry bridges were closely tied to oracular traditions. Unlike the famous Oracle of Delphi, which operated from a fixed temple, these bridge-based practices were more accessible to everyday people. Individuals seeking answers would often engage in a ritual known as incubation, where they would sleep overnight on or near the bridge, hoping to receive prophetic dreams from the gods. The bridge's arch was thought to frame these visions, focusing divine communication. Alternatively, priests might station themselves at these sites to interpret signs from nature. The specific flight patterns of birds crossing the bridge's span, the direction of the wind as it whistled through the stonework, or even the behavior of animals that gathered near the structure. Each of these phenomena was carefully observed and decoded as a message from the divine, with the bridge serving as both amplifier and interpreter of these cosmic signals. The methods of divination employed at these sites were as varied as the cultures that used them. In locations where a dry bridge happened to be near a seasonal stream or wash, priests might practice hydromancy, reading the future in the patterns of water flow after a rare rain, interpreting ripples, currents, and eddies as symbols of coming events. In Celtic regions, particularly during the festival of Samhain, when the veil between worlds was believed to be at its thinnest, bridges became centers for scrying. Practitioners would use bowls of water, polished stones, or even smoke from sacred fires held in ceremonial bowls, gazing into these reflective surfaces to see visions of what the future held. The bridge provided a stable, ritually prepared space for this intense concentration, its solid presence grounding the seeker while they journeyed in vision. Remarkably, the architecture of many dry bridges incorporates physical features that directly support these divinatory practices. Archaeologists have identified specific grooves cut into the parapets of certain bridges, perfectly sized to hold throwing sticks or bundles of lots used in cleromancy. The casting of marked objects to reveal patterns believed to hold prophetic meaning. Some bridges feature unusually flat, smooth stones at their centers, positioned to catch the light of the moon or stars at particular angles, creating natural reflective surfaces for scrying. At a site in Wales, researchers discovered a dry bridge with a series of precisely placed holes in its decking, Experimental archaeology revealed that when certain stones were dropped through these openings, they produced distinctive sounds that may have been interpreted as affirmative or negative responses to posed questions. The material evidence found at these sites powerfully confirms their use for seeking hidden knowledge. Excavations around dry bridges from Scotland to Anatolia have uncovered caches of specialized divination tools, bundles of marked bones used for casting lots, carefully polished bronze mirrors for scrying, and ceramic bowls with residue analysis indicating they once held substances known for their visionary properties. Perhaps most telling are the numerous small lead tablets found buried near these structures, inscribed with questions posed to the divine, requests about health, love, harvest outcomes, and travel safety. These personal petitions left at the bridge demonstrate how ordinary people sought to use this threshold space to access wisdom beyond their human limitations. These divinatory practices served a crucial psychological and social function in ancient societies. In facing the uncertainties of drought, disease, conflict, or personal misfortune, the ability to seek guidance provided a sense of agency and control. The bridge became a place where anxiety could be transformed into action, where vague fears could be shaped into specific questions and potentially receive answers. This process, whether the answers came from truly supernatural sources or simply from the reflective space the ritual provided, helped individuals and communities make difficult decisions with greater confidence. It embedded these dry bridges deep into the spiritual toolkit of the culture, making them not just monuments but active participants in the ongoing drama of human life, places where the community could collectively lean forward and try to read the signs of what was yet to come. Beyond seeking visions of the future, communities also turned to these bridges to address the immediate and very human experience of suffering, transforming them into powerful centers for healing and spiritual cleansing. Imagine the journey of a family in medieval Europe carrying a feverish child through the countryside to a place known simply as the Healing Bridge. This was not a journey to a physician's office, but a pilgrimage to a threshold where the physical and spiritual worlds were believed to intersect. Upon arrival, a local wise woman or healer, someone like anthropologist Dr. Fiona McKay describes, would guide them through a ceremony that blended practical herbal knowledge with profound spiritual invocation. The ritual might begin with the child being carefully walked under the bridge's arch 3 times, a number often associated with spiritual potency, symbolizing a passage away from illness and toward wellness. If a seasonal stream trickled below, its waters deemed sacred by their proximity to the bridge, would be used to anoint the child's forehead or wash their limbs, a physical act of purification believed to wash away both physical and spiritual corruption. The architecture of these bridges was often explicitly designed to support these vital functions. Unlike their purely utilitarian counterparts, healing bridges frequently featured small, carefully carved niches in their stonework. These weren't accidental imperfections but intentional receptacles. Families would leave behind small offerings, a carved wooden figure, a lock of hair, a handful of grain, or a personally significant charm as a petition for health, a physical embodiment of their plea left in the sacred space. The bridge itself might be adorned with protective symbols to amplify its healing energy. Carvings of the all-seeing eye to ward off the evil eye, believed to cause sickness, or the Hamsa hand, a universal symbol of protection, are common finds. These features turned the structure into more than a location. They made it an active participant in the healing process, its very stones believed to be imbued with protective and restorative power. This concept of the bridge as a place to literally leave one's ailments behind appears across cultures. In parts of rural Japan and China, specific dry bridges were used in rituals for those suffering from persistent or mental illnesses. The afflicted individual would cross the bridge slowly, often accompanied by a shaman whose chants were intended to coax the malady from the person's body. At the midpoint of the arch, they might pause to tie a small cloth strip to the railing, a custom still seen at some Shinto shrines today. This cloth acted as a symbolic container for the illness itself. By leaving it tied to the bridge, the person symbolically left their sickness behind, crossing the remainder of the span unburdened and hoping to step back into their life renewed. The air might be thick with the smoke of burning sage, mugwort, or other purifying herbs, their cleansing scent helping to define the sacred space and drive away negative influences. The archaeological record provides tangible, moving evidence of these practices that stretches back centuries. Excavations around European healing bridges have uncovered layers of soil rich with the microscopic remains of medicinal plants like chamomile, yarrow, and mint, suggesting they were either grown nearby for immediate use or burned in ceremonies. More poignant are the countless small votive offerings discovered, tiny crudely fashioned lead or terracotta models of afflicted body parts, a leg, an arm, a heart left as direct appeals to a saint or deity for healing that specific ailment. In one particularly evocative discovery in the English countryside, archaeologists found a small, worn wooden toy horse buried at the base of a healing bridge. It is believed a grieving parent may have left it as an offering for a deceased child, a final gift to ensure their safe passage and comfort in the afterlife, demonstrating how these sites addressed the ultimate healing, that of the spirit. These healing rituals reveal the dry bridge's role as a profound sanctuary for holistic transformation. It was a place where a community's fear and uncertainty about illness could be channeled into structured, hopeful action. The ceremonies provided a sense of agency in the face of suffering, a way to actively fight back against the invisible forces of disease and misfortune. They blended the practical, the knowledge of local herbs with the metaphysical, the invocation of divine aid in a way that made perfect sense within their worldview. Most importantly, these practices were rarely solitary. The presence of healers, family members, and sometimes the entire village turned healing into a communal act, strengthening social bonds and providing emotional support that was itself a powerful medicine. The bridge, in this context, became a tangible place of hope, a designated spot where human vulnerability met architectural permanence, and where the desperate desire for renewal could be physically enacted through ritual, offering comfort and a path forward even in the darkest of times. Beyond the deeply personal realms of healing and divination, these dry bridges also played a crucial role in defining the very fabric of society, serving as powerful markers of territory and stages for the rituals that govern the relationships between communities. Imagine a world without precise maps or fenced borders, where the edges of a tribe's domain were not lines on paper but features in the landscape, a distinctive hill, an ancient tree, or in this case, a solid, imposing bridge standing resolute in open country. These structures became unambiguous statements of presence and possession. A ceremony at such a boundary bridge wasn't merely a social gathering. It was a profound act of political and spiritual significance. When chieftains from neighboring tribes met at this neutral ground, they engaged in rituals designed to bless and fortify the invisible line that separated their peoples. This often involved the solemn exchange of gifts, perhaps a finely crafted weapon or a prized ceremonial vessel, a symbolic act of reciprocity that acknowledged mutual respect and the desire for peaceful coexistence. More potent still were the sacrifices offered to appease the guardian spirits believed to watch over the territory. The blood of a sacrificed animal, carefully spilled at the base of the bridge, was not an act of violence but a sacred offering, a payment to the spiritual forces to maintain the integrity of the boundary and ensure the prosperity of those living within it. Esteemed historian Dr. Rajiv Patel's research illuminates the complex protocols that govern these liminal spaces. To cross one of these boundary bridges was to undertake a significant act, a transition that required formal recognition. It symbolized moving from one jurisdiction into another, from the protection of your own local gods and laws into the domain of another. This passage was rarely a simple stroll. It demanded specific rituals to ensure safe and sanctioned entry. A traveler might be required to swear an oath of peaceful intent upon a stone embedded in the bridge's structure, their words witnessed by the community and the deities alike. In some cultures, a ceremonial toll was exacted, not merely a tax but a symbolic offering, perhaps a coin thrown into a designated cleft in the stone or a portion of goods left at a small wayside shrine. These acts transformed the simple act of crossing from a mundane movement into a ritually acknowledged event, reinforcing social order and mutual respect between different groups. A particularly vivid example of this function comes from feudal Japan, where dry bridges, known as keikashi, were strategically placed in the contested zones between the domains of powerful lords or daimyo. These were not points of constant conflict but were instead formally recognized as neutral ground, a concept deeply embedded in Japanese diplomacy. When two rival lords needed to negotiate a truce, form an alliance, or settle a dispute, they would often choose to meet precisely at the center of such a bridge. This was a powerfully calculated piece of political theater. By meeting on the bridge, neither leader was entering the other's territory. Both remained on neutral, sacred ground, a space that belonged to neither and yet was respected by both. The architecture itself supported this role. Many featured ornate gates at either end that could be symbolically opened or closed, and some were flanked by statues of Neo or other guardian figures, their fierce visages a permanent reminder of the consequences of violating the peace forged there. The physical evidence uncovered by archaeologists provides undeniable proof of these territorial functions. Excavations around these sites frequently yield artifacts like carefully placed boundary stones inscribed with the names or symbols of adjacent communities. In some cases, researchers have discovered buried caches containing the actual tools of these diplomatic rituals, identical ceremonial cups used for shared drinks to seal an agreement, standardized weights for measuring tribute or tolls, or even lead tablets inscribed with the terms of treaties. The bridges themselves often bear the marks of their purpose, where patterns on the stone can show heavier traffic on one side than the other, indicating a controlled point of entry rather than a free-flowing thoroughfare. Certain bridges feature unusual architectural elements, like a central stone that divides the deck into two distinct halves, a physical manifestation of the border itself. These territorial rituals were far more than mere formalities. They were essential tools for maintaining stability in a world where conflict over resources and land was a constant threat. By formalizing relationships and respecting territorial integrity through shared ceremony, these bridges became pillars of social and political order. They provided a structured, sacred space where tensions could be mediated without violence, where agreements could be sanctified by both human law and divine witness. This function demonstrates the incredible versatility of these structures. They were not solely concerned with the cosmos or the spirit world. They were deeply engaged in the pragmatic, earthly need to organize human society peacefully. They became the physical anchors for the fragile agreements that allowed communities to thrive side by side, proving that a bridge that crossed no water could indeed connect worlds, not just the spiritual and the mortal, but the often contentious worlds of neighboring peoples. In the constant struggle for survival that defined ancient agrarian life, these dry bridges became powerful focal points for the most fundamental of human concerns, fertility. For societies whose very existence depended on the whims of weather and soil, ensuring bountiful harvests and thriving livestock was not a matter of luxury but of life and death. Consequently, these structures were often central to elaborate rituals designed to coax abundance from the earth and encourage reproduction within the community. Picture the scene each spring in a Neolithic village in ancient Anatolia, a region renowned for its rich soil and early agricultural innovations. As the time for planting drew near, the entire community would gather at their local dry bridge, a structure dedicated to the mother goddess Cybele. The air would be thick with anticipation and the scent of damp earth. A solemn yet hopeful procession would form, led by the village elders and spiritual leaders. At the heart of this procession would be the most potent symbols of their hopes, sheaves of the previous year's best barley, carefully preserved for this moment, small, crudely fashioned clay figurines of bulls and rams with exaggerated reproductive features, and perhaps a beautifully woven effigy of the goddess herself. As they crossed the bridge in a slow, rhythmic cadence, their chanting would rise and fall, a collective plea for the earth to awaken and be fruitful once more. This was not mere superstition, it was a profound act of sympathetic magic, a physical enactment of their deepest desires made tangible through ritual. Esteemed archaeologist Dr. Elena Sobek has dedicated her career to decoding this agricultural language carved in stone. Her work reveals a fascinating and nearly universal design principle among these fertility bridges, their deliberate alignment with water, even if that water was only present seasonally. A bridge might span a dry wash that transforms into a raging torrent during the spring melt, or it might point directly toward a distant sacred spring that never runs dry. This was a deeply symbolic choice. Water was the ultimate life giver, the essential element without which all fertility failed. By physically connecting their rituals to the concept of water, even its memory or potential, these communities were creating a powerful symbolic link to the very source of creation itself. The carvings adorning these bridges leave little doubt about their purpose. Unlike the celestial spirals or protective eyes found on other ritual bridges, these are adorned with a distinctly earthy vocabulary. Archaeologists have documented intricate bas-reliefs of plows cutting through fertile soil, sheaves of wheat bursting with grain, vines heavy with fruit, and in one particularly poignant example from a site in the English Cotswolds, a series of beautifully rendered pregnant animals, a ewe, a cow, and a sow, their swollen sides a direct and unmistakable petition for healthy livestock. Abundant milk, the artifacts recovered from the soil around these sites tell a powerful story of communal investment in these life-giving ceremonies. Excavations frequently uncover the remains of what can only be described as ritual feasting, thick layers of animal bones from young, healthy animals sacrificed for the occasion, mixed with carbonized seeds and the shattered remains of large, communal cooking pots. More specialized objects point directly to the ceremonies themselves. In Turkey, researchers found a cache of miniature ceremonial plows carved from antler, too small and fragile for any practical use but perfect for being carried in a processional rite to symbolically open the earth for planting. In a field adjacent to a Danish dry bridge, a small, sealed pottery vessel was discovered filled with a mixture of ancient wheat seeds and a single, perfectly preserved bee, an insect universally associated with pollination and thus fertility. These were not casual gestures, they were carefully considered offerings, the physical remnants of a desperate and hopeful dialogue between a people and the land that sustained them. This function underscores perhaps the most practical and yet profound role of the dry bridge, its absolute centrality to the community's subsistence strategy. In a world without scientific understanding of weather patterns or soil chemistry, Ritual provided a framework for action and a channel for hope. These ceremonies transformed the overwhelming anxiety of potential famine into a structured communal activity. Everyone had a role to play, from the children who scattered the first handfuls of blessed seed to the elders who chanted the ancient prayers. The bridge itself became the stage for this performance of survival, its solid, enduring presence a reassuring constant in the unpredictable cycle of seasons. It connected them not to another piece of land, but to the very cycles of life and nature upon which their futures depended. This deep, intrinsic link between ritual and practicality ensured that these bridges were not peripheral curiosities but the very heart of agricultural life, a testament to the human drive to nurture and protect the sources of all life. The concept of justice in ancient and medieval societies extended far beyond written laws, often intertwining with the spiritual fabric of the community, and dry bridges provided the perfect stage for this fusion of earthly judgment and divine oversight. These structures, existing in that potent space between one place and another, were naturally seen as thresholds where the veil between the human and spiritual realms was thin, making them ideal for proceedings where absolute truth was the ultimate goal. In many parts of medieval Europe, a specific type of dry bridge earned the name Justice Bridge, becoming the designated location for resolving disputes, determining guilt, and administering punishments. The process was deeply ritualistic. An individual accused of a crime might be required to walk the length of the bridge to swear an oath of innocence before the assembled community and local elders. The act of crossing was not merely for show, it was a test in itself. The community believed that the bridge, as a sacred object, would not bear a false oath. A stumble, a hesitation, or even a perceived crack in the stone beneath the accuser's foot could be interpreted as a supernatural sign of guilt, a direct judgment from the divine forces overseeing the proceedings. Esteemed historian Dr. Thomas Byron's research sheds detailed light on the variety of judicial ordeals these sites hosted. In locations where a dry bridge spanned a gully that seasonally filled with rainwater or snowmelt, the ritual of ordeal by water might be employed. An accused person could be lowered from the bridge into the water below. Their sinking or floating was read as a sign of innocence or guilt, a terrifying physical test whose outcome was attributed to higher powers. For less severe disputes or as a form of public censure, the bridge itself could be outfitted with stocks or pillories. Being locked into these devices on the bridge was a punishment amplified by its very public nature. The offender was put on literal display at the community's central crossroads of ritual and social life, subjected to the scorn and judgment of every passing neighbor. This public shaming was a powerful tool for reinforcing social norms and deterring others from breaking communal trust. The architecture of these judicial bridges often bore permanent marks of their solemn purpose. While some featured carvings of the scales of justice or a blindfolded deity to emphasize impartiality, others were more starkly functional. Iron rings cemented into the stonework for securing prisoners, worn grooves in the parapet from ropes used in ordeals, or even the haunting presence of a gallows constructed at one end of the bridge, all served as grim reminders of the consequences of transgressing the community's laws. Yet, these spaces were not solely for punishment. They were also crucial for reconciliation and the formal resolution of conflicts. In many tribal and feudal cultures, a dry bridge represented neutral territory. Two warring families or rival clans could agree to meet at the precise center of the bridge for negotiations. This halfway point was powerfully symbolic. It meant neither side was entering the other's domain, placing them on equal footing under the watchful eyes of both their communities and the gods. Here, treaties were sworn upon, blood feuds were formally ended with a handshake over the arch, and reparations were exchanged, with the bridge itself acting as the sacred witness that made the agreement binding. The archaeological evidence unearthed at these sites provides tangible and often somber proof of these practices, while organic materials like wood from gallows or stocks have rarely survived. Their telltale post holes have been identified in the earth at the approaches to certain bridges. More enduring artifacts include fragments of legal documents, lead or wax tablets inscribed with the terms of a settlement, discarded or buried at the site to sanctify the agreement. In one particularly revealing discovery in the Scottish borders, metal detectors located a cache of deliberately bent and broken iron knives buried near a justice bridge. Historians interpret this as a ritual deposit, the physical remains of a ceremony where weapons were symbolically rendered useless to mark the end of a violent conflict, their burial at the bridge sealing the peace pact. These findings confirm that the bridge's role in justice was not a peripheral function but a core aspect of maintaining social order. This judicial dimension reveals the dry bridge as a multifunctional pillar of governance. It was a courtroom, a prison, and a diplomatic hall rolled into one enduring stone structure. The rituals performed there leveraged the bridge's immense symbolic weight to legitimize judicial outcomes, transforming human decisions into divinely sanctioned decrees. This process was essential for deterring wrongdoing in a world without modern policing, and for resolving disputes in a way that the entire community could accept as final and fair. The Justice Bridge stood as a stark, permanent symbol that the community's laws were not arbitrary, but were anchored in the very landscape and sanctified by the spiritual world, ensuring that order was maintained not just through fear of punishment, but through respect for a system that connected the act of judgment to the divine. While the celestial alignments of these bridges connected communities to the cosmos, their role as precise timekeeping instruments anchored that cosmic connection directly to the rhythm of daily life, transforming them into the communal calendars of the ancient world. This function represents a breathtaking fusion of careful observation and practical necessity, where the grand movements of the heavens were harnessed to dictate the timing of everything from sowing seeds to honoring the gods. The sophistication required for this cannot be overstated. It wasn't merely about noting that the sun rose in a different place each day. It was about predicting its exact position months or even years in advance, then designing and constructing a massive stone structure to act as an irreversible, permanent marker for that specific celestial moment. This demanded generations of accumulated knowledge, a deep, intimate understanding of cyclical patterns passed down through oral tradition and refined by each successive generation of sky watchers. Consider the mechanics of such a device. A dry bridge in the Scottish Highlands, for instance, doesn't just catch the light on the summer solstice. It is engineered so that the tip of its longest shadow, cast by a specific parapet, travels across the ground throughout the year like the hand of a giant clock. For most of the year, this shadow falls in a meaningless pattern across grass and stone, but on one morning, the summer solstice, that dark finger touches a single, seemingly ordinary rock embedded in the earth a precise distance away. That contact was the trigger. It was the built-in alarm that told the entire community with absolute certainty that the longest day had arrived. There was no debate, no need for a chieftain's declaration. The stones themselves made the announcement. This removed all uncertainty from the ritual calendar, creating a stability that was vital for survival in an unpredictable world. As expert Dr. Leo Grant highlights, this transformed the bridge into far more than a monument. It became a communal clock of immense reliability, a shared reference point that synchronized every individual's activities with the undeniable rhythm of the universe itself. The rituals that sprung from this precise timing were deeply enhanced by their astronomical precision. A planting festival wasn't just held in early spring. It was initiated on the morning the sun's rays first streamed through the eastern arch of the bridge to illuminate a carving of a seed on the western abutment. This gave the ceremony an incredible potency. The community wasn't just asking the gods for a good harvest, they were performing their request at the exact moment the cosmos deemed most auspicious, aligning their human intentions with the perceived divine schedule. Processions were meticulously choreographed to these celestial events. Participants would begin their walk from a sacred grove as the sun touched the horizon, their pace calculated so that the entire group would cross the bridge's threshold at the very instant the first sliver of the sun's disk appeared above the distant hills. This wasn't theater, it was a profound act of participation, a way for every person present to physically step in time with the universe, their movement across the bridge symbolizing their community's harmonious place within the grand cosmic order. The evidence for this function is often carved directly into the stone itself, a permanent user manual for the sacred calendar. Many of these timekeeping bridges feature intricate petroglyphs that serve as more than just decoration. A series of 12 concentric circles might mark the months between winter solstices, while a row of 19 smaller pits could represent the metonic cycle, a complex 19-year period after which the phases of the moon recur on the same dates of the solar year. Inscriptions, though often weathered away, sometimes remain faintly visible notches tallying the days until an equinox or symbols representing specific deities associated with each season. These carvings turn the bridge into an open-air archive, ensuring that the knowledge of its purpose would endure far beyond the lifespan of its builders. They provided a visual and tactile guide for the priests or elders responsible for reading the sky and the shadow, allowing them to teach the next generation how to maintain this vital link between heaven and earth. By examining the archaeological context of these sites, we gain a fuller picture of how this timekeeping function operated within the community. The discovery of small, polished stones or ceramic discs near these bridges, often marked with solar or lunar symbols, suggests they may have been used as portable counting devices, a kind of ancient abacus for tracking the days between major celestial events. The arrangement of post holes in the ground surrounding some bridges indicates that temporary markers or viewing platforms were erected to help larger crowds witness the precise alignment, turning what was a scientific observation into a public spectacle and a shared experience. This blending of meticulous science with profound spirituality is the true genius of these structures. They satisfied the human need for both practical predictability and mystical meaning. They answered the farmer's question of when to plant with astronomical certainty while simultaneously answering the priest's question of when to pray with spiritual significance. This dual role made the dry bridge an indispensable heart of the community, a stone anchor in the flow of time that ensured the rituals which sustained both body and soul occurred at exactly the right moment, forever linking the destiny of the people to the dependable dance of the sun, moon, and stars. While the spiritual and judicial roles of these bridges were profound, their influence extended powerfully into the very practical world of commerce and trade, transforming them into bustling hubs where economic activity was sanctified by ritual. These were not the chaotic marketplaces we might imagine today, but carefully orchestrated events where every transaction was underpinned by a shared belief in fairness, trust, and divine oversight. The bridge, standing as a permanent, neutral landmark, provided the ideal venue for these gatherings. Its very structure created a natural, contained space, a designated zone where different groups, often from distant regions, could meet with a mutual understanding of the sacred rules governing their exchange. The act of crossing onto the bridge to trade was itself a ritual, signifying an entry into a space where ordinary conduct was suspended, and a higher standard of honesty was expected and enforced by spiritual forces. Economic anthropologist Dr. Sophia Menz has spent years tracing the patterns of these ancient trade rituals, and her work reveals a fascinating psychological layer to these events. In a world without standardized currency, banking systems, or enforceable contracts, trust was the most valuable and fragile commodity of all. The rituals performed at these bridge markets were sophisticated mechanisms for building that essential trust. Before a single good was bartered or a price negotiated, a ceremony might be held under the central arch of the bridge. A communal offering, perhaps a shared cup of wine poured as a libation to a god of merchants like the Roman Mercury or the Greek Hermes, would formally open the market. Traders would anoint their wares with oil or incense, not merely to make them smell pleasant, but to purify them and dedicate the impending transaction to a divine witness. This collective act created a powerful social and spiritual bond among the participants, a shared understanding that deceitful practices were not just a breach of contract, but a sacrilegious offense that would invite supernatural retribution. This concept was absolutely critical along vast and perilous trade networks like the Silk Road. Here, dry bridges often served as crucial way stations in the immense, empty stretches between major settlements. For a caravan master about to lead his precious goods and crew through bandit-infested mountain passes or treacherous deserts, a stop at a known ritual bridge was an essential part of the journey's preparation. It was here that solemn oath-taking ceremonies were conducted. The merchants and guards would gather on the bridge, and each would swear upon a sacred symbol carved into its stonework, a stylized pair of scales, a handshake, or an unblinking eye, vowing to uphold their duties with honesty and courage. They believed that the bridge itself, having witnessed countless such oaths, held a kind of accumulated spiritual power that would punish any who broke their word. This ritual transformed a simple business agreement into a covenant, binding the party together not just by profit, but by a shared fear of divine consequence and a mutual respect for the sanctity of the space they stood upon. The physical design of these bridges often incorporated features that directly supported their economic and ritual functions. Unlike a simple arch built for crossing, these market bridges frequently had unusually wide decks, essentially creating a ready-made platform for setting up stalls. Archaeologists have identified the remains of semi-permanent stone booths built into the abutments, likely used by a market official to collect a ceremonial toll or to oversee the fairness of transactions. Small, well-worn niches are a common find in the stonework of these bridges. These were not casual holes but intentional receptacles for leaving small offerings, a coin, a pinch of spice, a bead, a small payment to the spirit of the bridge or the gods of commerce to ensure a profitable day. The artifacts recovered from the soil around these sites are a treasure trove of economic history. Standardized sets of bronze weights and stone measures speak to a regulated system of fair trade. Caches of foreign coins and the distinctive clay seals used to stamp and guarantee the contents of amphorae or fabric bales provide silent testimony to the long-distance connections that these sacred markets facilitated. Ultimately, these economic rituals did more than just grease the wheels of commerce. They fundamentally transformed trade from a potentially hostile negotiation between strangers into a cohesive, communal event that strengthened the entire social fabric. The seasonal fair at the bridge was a highlight of the year, an occasion for news and gossip to be exchanged alongside goods, for marriages to be arranged, and for a scattered population to reaffirm its shared identity. The rituals ensured that prosperity was not viewed as a solitary pursuit, but as a collective blessing earned through honesty and reinforced by divine favor. The dry bridge, therefore, stood as a powerful symbol of economic stability, a place where the abstract concept of trust was made tangible through ceremony, and where the practical needs of survival were seamlessly woven into the spiritual beliefs that gave that survival meaning. This intricate blending of market and temple, of prophet and prayer, demonstrates once again the incredible versatility of these structures, proving they were as central to a community's economic health as they were to its spiritual soul. Amidst the tranquil landscapes where these bridges stand, it is almost jarring to consider their role in the brutal, high-stakes world of warfare. Yet for many ancient societies, the journey from youth to warrior was one of the most critical passages a person could undertake, and the dry bridge provided the perfect symbolic stage for this transformation. Imagine a young Viking, perhaps only 15 or 16 years old, standing before his community's bridge on a crisp morning. He is not the boy he was yesterday. Today, he will cross this arch of stone and, in doing so, cross the invisible boundary into manhood and the life of a warrior. This was no mere metaphor. It was a deeply psychological ritual designed to forge a new identity. The bridge served as a physical manifestation of the line between the safety and simplicity of childhood and the brutal responsibilities of the adult world, a world where he would be expected to protect his family, his chieftain, and his honor with his life. The act of walking across alone, under the watchful eyes of his elders and the carvings of the gods, was a solitary and daunting test of nerve before he ever faced the chaos of a shield wall. Esteemed historian Dr. Kenji Tanaka's research into these martial rites reveals a common, cross-cultural pattern of using the bridge's liminality to heighten the gravity of the moment. The ceremonies were often grueling and multisensory, designed to create a powerful, unforgettable memory. Before the crossing, a young initiate might be subjected to tests of strength and endurance, lifting heavy stones from the base of the bridge, holding a challenging stance on its narrow parapet, or engaging in a ritualized first blood combat on the approach. These physical trials were followed by solemn acts of oath-taking. The aspiring warrior would often swear his loyalty and courage upon a weapon, his own axe or sword, laid across the central keystone of the bridge. This weapon was more than a tool. It was an extension of his soul and his honor, and swearing upon it in this sacred space made the vow unbreakable. Offerings were crucial to sealing this pact. A prized possession, a finely crafted brooch, a personal amulet, or even a lock of hair, might be cast into a fissure in the bridge's stonework or buried at its base as a gift to the gods of war, a plea for their favor and protection in the battles to come. The architecture of these warrior bridges often served as a permanent training manual and a source of spiritual intimidation. The stone itself was frequently carved with a stark and powerful vocabulary of conflict. Unlike the fertile spirals or celestial maps on other bridges, these featured bas reliefs of shields, spears, and axes, not as decorative patterns but as explicit symbols of the tools of the trade. Some bridges displayed scenes of legendary battles or heroic figures from myth, providing a model of valor for the initiates to emulate. Perhaps most evocative are the guardian figures. In Scandinavia, bridges might be flanked by posts carved into the likeness of Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, a constant reminder that a warrior must be both clever and mindful of his heritage. In other cultures, fearsome representations of local war deities, their faces contorted in a battle frenzy, were positioned to glare down at anyone who approached. Their terrifying visage served a dual purpose: to daunt the initiate, testing his courage before he even set foot on the bridge, and to ward off any malevolent spirits that might threaten the sacredness of the ritual. The archaeological evidence uncovered at these sites is some of the most dramatic and poignant. While organic materials like wood and leather rarely survive, the enduring metal tells a compelling story. In the peat bogs near a famed warrior bridge in Denmark, archaeologists discovered a cache of deliberately damaged weapons, spearheads bent into uselessness, swords expertly broken in two. This was not the result of battle but a ritual act. These were likely offerings, killed to dedicate them to the gods, much like a votive offering, taking them out of the human world and placing them firmly in the divine. Even more personal finds include fragments of ritual armor, a helmet cheek piece etched with protective runes, a boss from a shield bearing the mark of a specific war band deliberately deposited in the earth near the bridge's foundation, perhaps to absorb its protective power or to mark a warrior's successful initiation. Perhaps the most powerful example comes from a remote dry bridge in central Sweden, where runologists discovered a series of runic inscriptions carved deeply into the stone parapets. They are not simple signatures or markers. One reads, "Arvin, grant fury and fearlessness to he who crosses," while another states, "Toki placed this stone and crossed for glory." These are not idle boasts, they are permanent public petitions to the highest war god, forever linking the act of crossing with a plea for divine intervention in combat. They transform the bridge from a passive structure into an active participant in the warrior's psyche, a place where a man could literally inscribe his fears and hopes into stone before walking into the uncertainty of battle. These martial rituals ultimately served a profound social purpose far beyond preparing an individual for combat. They were powerful engines for building the unbreakable group identity essential for any warrior society. A band of young men who underwent this harrowing experience together, who swore oaths on the same stone and offered gifts to the same god, were no longer just individuals, they were a brotherhood. The shared memory of crossing that bridge together became a foundational pillar of their unit cohesion, a touchstone they could return to in the midst of the terror of battle. The ceremony used the bridge's immense symbolic weight to inscribe the core values of bravery, loyalty, and ferocity directly into the cultural DNA of each new generation. This function reveals that these structures were not just backdrops for ceremony, but were fundamental tools for building and maintaining the very social structures that allowed these communities to survive and project their power, proving once again that a bridge to nowhere could indeed lead a warrior to his destiny. Imagine the profound sense of relief and optimism that must have washed over a community as they gathered at their local dry bridge to mark the end of a long, harsh winter. These structures became the heart of ceremonies dedicated to seasonal renewal, serving as powerful engines for both collective hope and psychological cleansing. The rituals performed here were far more than simple celebrations. They were a deeply symbolic and communal way of hitting the reset button on the year, of shedding the accumulated burdens of the past season and stepping forward into a new cycle with a sense of purified purpose. The bridge itself, a permanent fixture in the ever-changing landscape, became the perfect metaphor for this transition, a stable threshold between what was and what could be. One of the most vivid and widespread practices involved a ceremonial procession across the bridge. Participants would approach carrying objects that represented their personal or communal struggles from the past year. These weren't random items, each was chosen for its symbolic weight. A farmer might carry a broken plowshare, representing a season of poor harvests or failed crops. A family might bring a small effigy woven from straw, meant to embody a period of illness or conflict within the household. As each person crossed the bridge, they would cast these objects down into the dry riverbed below. This wasn't mere littering, it was a potent act of sympathetic magic. The physical act of throwing something away, of watching it fall from the solid, sacred space of the bridge into the emptiness below, provided a powerful psychological release. It was a way of making the intangible tangible, of physically discarding misfortune, and metaphorically leaving it behind as they stepped onto the other side, ready to embrace the new season unburdened. Cultural historian Dr. Anya Sharma provides a crucial framework for understanding these ceremonies, noting that they reinforced a fundamentally cyclical view of time. For these ancient societies, time was not a linear march forward but a great, repeating wheel of seasons, life, death, and rebirth. The dry bridge in this context acted as a literal portal between these cycles. Crossing it during a festival like the spring equinox or a New Year celebration wasn't just a walk. It was a symbolic journey from the death of winter into the rebirth of spring, from the old year into the new. This perspective transformed the bridge from a static object into a dynamic participant in the rhythm of the cosmos, a fixed point that the community could use to orient themselves within the eternal turning of the Great Wheel. The decoration of these bridges for these events further emphasized their role as portals of renewal. In many traditions, the stark stone would be transformed with vibrant, living decorations. For spring festivals, arches might be woven with fresh, budding branches and early blooming flowers, physically tying the structure to the awakening earth. During harvest festivals, the bridge might be draped with garlands of grain, vines heavy with fruit, and autumnal leaves, celebrating the abundance that would see the community through the coming winter. In some cultures, as darkness fell, the bridge would be illuminated by dozens of lamps or torches, their light pushing back the encroaching night and symbolizing the persistence of hope and life even in the darker times of the year. This transformation of the bridge's appearance marked it as a space outside of ordinary time, a place where the community's hopes for fertility and prosperity were made visible. A beautiful example of this practice comes from parts of rural Europe, where May Day celebrations often centered on the local dry bridge. At dawn, the community would gather and process across the bridge to a nearby forest or grove. There, they would gather fresh greenery branches of hawthorn, birch, and other trees just coming into leaf. The return journey across the bridge, now carrying armfuls of this vibrant new growth, was a powerful symbol of literally bringing life and fertility back into the heart of the village. The greenery would then be used to decorate homes and communal spaces, a constant visual reminder that the barrenness of winter had passed and a new season of growth had begun. This act of gathering and returning was a participatory ritual that everyone could join, strengthening the bond between the people, their architecture, and the natural world upon which they depended. The archaeological record surrounding these sites offers tangible proof of these joyous, yet deeply meaningful, celebrations. Excavations have uncovered layers of organic material at the bases of these bridges, thick concentrations of pollen from specific spring flowers, suggesting they were deposited in large quantities during festivals. Perhaps more evocative are the finds of ritual objects. In Germany, a cache of carefully crafted masks was discovered buried near a dry bridge, their designs featuring motifs of smiling suns and leafy greenery. These were likely worn during dances and processions, allowing the wearers to embody the spirits of the new season. Other finds include the remains of enormous communal feasting pits located near these bridges, filled with the bones of animals slaughtered for the occasion and fragments of large, coarse pottery used to serve food and drink to the entire community. These renewal rituals served an absolutely vital function that went beyond mere superstition. They provided a structured outlet for collective anxiety. After a difficult winter filled with uncertainty about food stores and survival, the Spring Renewal Festival was a sanctioned moment to release that pent-up fear and celebrate simply having made it through. It fostered immense social cohesion, bringing everyone together in a shared, positive experience that reinforced their collective identity and mutual support. By participating in these ceremonies at the bridge, the community wasn't just hoping for a better season. They were actively performing their way into it, using the symbolic power of the structure to cultivate the resilience and hope needed to face another year's challenges. This profound role in the emotional and psychological well-being of a society shows us that the dry bridge was, in every sense, a cornerstone of not just their landscape, but of their very spirit. Now consider the profound psychological power of these ceremonies. In the face of a relentless drought, with crops withering and water stores dwindling, a community could easily succumb to despair and helplessness. The rain invocation ritual at the dry bridge transformed that paralyzing anxiety into purposeful, collective action. It provided a structured outlet for fear and a tangible way to channel hope. Everyone had a role to play: the elders who knew the chants, the dancers who embodied the coming storm, the children who poured the libations. This wasn't about guaranteed results in a scientific sense. It was about maintaining agency and social cohesion in the face of an uncontrollable natural force. The act of coming together to perform the ritual was in itself a reaffirmation of community strength and a refusal to surrender passively to their circumstances. The bridge, as the stable, unchanging stage for this performance, represented endurance and faith, a man-made constant that they could rely upon even when the rains were not. This function reveals the incredible adaptability of these structures. They were not locked into a single, rigid meaning. In a lush, water-rich landscape, a dry bridge might serve as a celestial calendar or a site for ancestor worship. But in an arid zone, the very same form could be reinterpreted to address the most pressing existential need: the desperate prayer for life-giving water. This ability to hold multiple, context-dependent meanings is what made these bridges such enduring and central features of the ritual landscape, their significance flowing and changing with the needs of the people who built them. While the previous rituals often centered on the needs of a settled community, these enigmatic bridges also served a vital purpose for those in motion, becoming sacred waypoints on the great pilgrimage routes that crisscrossed the ancient world. For the weary traveler on a spiritual journey, the sight of a dry bridge rising from the landscape was not a confusing anomaly but a welcomed beacon. It signified a designated place of pause, a ritual station where the physical act of travel could be sanctified and the inner journey of devotion could be deepened. These structures transformed a long and often arduous trek into a series of meaningful stages, each bridge offering an opportunity for purification, reflection, and connection with the divine before taking the next step forward. The pilgrimage was as much about the transformative power of the journey itself as it was about reaching the final destination, and these bridges provided the architectural anchors for that transformation. Esteemed religious studies scholar Dr. Priya Joshi beautifully frames the act of crossing one of these bridges as a powerful metaphor for the pilgrim's entire quest. The physical structure came to represent the overcoming of spiritual obstacles, the doubts, fears, and distractions that could plague a traveler. The ceremony of crossing was therefore a miniature enactment of the larger struggle. A pilgrim might pause at the foot of the bridge to meditate on the challenges they had already faced, then offer a prayer for strength before deliberately stepping onto the span. The crossing itself was done with mindful intention, each step a move away from the mundane world they had left behind and a step closer to the sacred goal that lay ahead. Reaching the other side was a small but significant victory, a tangible reminder that perseverance leads to progress both on the path and within the soul. This metaphorical function was brought to life through specific, tangible rituals. On ancient Buddhist pilgrimage routes across Asia, particularly in regions like Tibet and Nepal, certain dry bridges were renowned as sites for accumulating merit. Pilgrims would engage in practices like circumambulation, walking a ritual number of times around the base of the bridge's pillars while chanting mantras and spinning prayer wheels. Each circuit was believed to generate positive karma, cleansing the traveler and bringing them closer to enlightenment. The act of leaving a votive offering was also common. A pilgrim might select a stone from a nearby riverbed, even a dry one, and add it to a growing cairn at the bridge's abutment, a silent testament to their passage and their prayers. Others would tie ragged strips of cloth from their own clothing to the bridge's railings, a practice seen from the Japanese Shinto tradition to Celtic pathways, physically leaving a piece of their old self behind as they moved forward, lighter and more purified. The architecture of these pilgrimage bridges was often explicitly designed to support these devotions. Unlike a simple arch, many featured small shrines or niches built directly into their stonework. These housed simple statues of protective deities or bodhisattvas, allowing a traveler to stop and make a quick offering without ever leaving the path. Some bridges had altars carved from their parapets, providing a flat surface to light a small stick of incense or leave a handful of rice as an offering. Inscriptions were also common, though not always in words. A series of carved footprints or Buddhapada on the approach to a bridge might signal to a pilgrim that this was a place to pause and pay respect, just as the Buddha himself had done. These features turned the bridge into more than a crossing. It became an open-air temple, a sanctuary without walls that was always available to the devoted traveler. The artifacts found by archaeologists at these sites tell a deeply human story of faith and perseverance. The discovery of pilgrim badges, small, mass-produced metal tokens depicting a saint or a sacred symbol, is particularly telling. These were purchased at major pilgrimage sites and then worn on a hat or cloak to denote that the journey had been completed. Finding them lost or deposited near a dry bridge suggests that these waypoints were important enough for pilgrims to stop, adjust their gear, and perhaps accidentally lose these cherished mementos. Similarly, the unearthing of small, simple ceramic offering bowls near these bridges indicates that even with limited space and resources, pilgrims felt compelled to perform their devotions properly at these hallowed spots. These small, personal items connect us directly to the individuals who crossed these spans centuries ago, their hopes and fears preserved in the objects they left behind. Ultimately, the pilgrimage bridge served as a crucial link in a vast spiritual network. It connected the solitary devotion of the individual traveler to the broader, powerful currents of a shared religious tradition. By stopping at a bridge that countless pilgrims had visited before, a person was participating in a timeless ritual, adding their own prayers to a chorus that stretched back generations. This function highlights the incredible versatility of these structures. They supported a different kind of mobility, not the daily commute of villagers or the march of warriors, but the slow, purposeful journey of the seeker. They provided spiritual sustenance and symbolic reassurance, ensuring that the path to enlightenment, though long, was marked with places of grace and meaning, encouraging every step forward with the promise of transformation that lay just across the next sacred threshold. The act of animal sacrifice at these dry bridges was a profound and visceral transaction, a solemn exchange where life was offered to secure the favor of the gods. This was not a casual act of violence but a deeply ritualized process designed to channel the power of life itself into a conduit for communication with the divine. The ceremony would begin with a careful selection of the animal, an unblemished lamb, a prized bull, or a pure white dove, its perfection making it a worthy gift. The community would gather, and the chosen creature would be ceremonially led across the length of the bridge. This procession was critical. With every step, the animal was symbolically moving from the ordinary world of the living into a sacred space, its crossing transforming it from a simple beast of the field into a consecrated offering. The bridge itself became the final threshold, its arch framing the moment of transition, marking the precise point where the mundane ended and the sacred began. The solid, enduring stone of the structure lent a sense of permanence and gravity to an act that was both temporary and immense, grounding the ritual in the landscape and in the collective memory of the people. Esteemed archaeologist Dr. Ben Carter's work provides the tangible and often stark evidence that brings these ceremonies out of the realm of speculation. Excavations at sites across Europe and Asia have uncovered deep, layered deposits of animal bones not scattered randomly as from a feast, but carefully sorted and buried. The remains of sheep, cattle, and birds show distinctive cut marks from exceptionally sharp, specialized blades, indicating a precise and practiced hand behind the sacrifice, not a crude slaughter. In some cases, the skulls of large animals like bulls have been found arranged in deliberate patterns facing the eastern approach of a bridge, perhaps to greet the rising sun god with their sacrifice. Even more telling are the discoveries of the tools themselves. Ritual knives, often crafted from gleaming bronze or obsidian and far too ornate for everyday use, have been found buried in caches near these bridges. These were not discarded but deliberately deposited, retired from their sacred duty and returned to the earth, much like the lives they had taken. The architecture of these bridges was often explicitly designed to accommodate and sanctify this bloody work. While a simple utilitarian bridge needs only to support weight and span a gap, a sacrificial bridge required specific features to manage the physical and spiritual consequences of the act. Archaeologists have identified bridges with shallow, carefully carved channels running along the surface of the stone deck, leading to small holes in the parapet. These were not for rainwater. They were designed to channel the blood of the sacrifice away from the ritual space, perhaps collecting it in ceremonial bowls below to be used as a potent blessing or sprinkled on the fields to ensure fertility. Some bridges feature flat, table-like extensions on their abutments or central platforms that rise slightly above the walkway. Clear functional spaces that served as altars, providing a stable, dedicated surface for the priest to perform the decisive act. The stonework itself often tells the story. Carvings depicting priests holding ceremonial knives over bound animals, or processions of figures leading beasts to an altar, are not merely decorative. They are a permanent record of the rituals that define the place, ensuring that even if the practice ceased, its memory would be set in stone. The purpose of these sacrifices varied widely, reflecting the core concerns of the communities that performed them. In the vast, organized state rituals of ancient Rome, a dry bridge near a military camp might be the site of a suovtorilia, the sacrifice of a pig, a sheep, and a bull to the god Mars. Here, the goal was to purify the army and secure victory in an upcoming campaign. The blood was collected and used to anoint the weapons and standards of the legionnaires, a literal infusion of divine power into their tools of war. Conversely, in the agrarian societies of pre-Columbian America, a sacrifice at a village bridge might be a desperate plea to a rain god during a drought. The life of the animal was offered in exchange for the life-giving water that would save the community's crops, its blood soaking into the dry earth as a symbolic precursor to the hoped for rain. In both cases, the bridge provided the ideal setting, a known, sanctified, and liminal space where the immense exchange of a life for a favor could be formally and communally conducted. This practice, while somber, underscores the bridge's ultimate role as a mediator of the most profound exchange imaginable. It became the point of contact where the community could physically demonstrate the value of their plea by offering their most valuable possession, life itself. The ritual reinforced social hierarchies, as the right to perform the sacrifice typically fell to a priestly or ruling class, legitimizing their authority as the sole intermediaries with the divine. The shared experience of witnessing such a potent ceremony, the tension, the focused action, the collective release would have bound the community together in a powerful way, uniting them in their dependence on forces greater than themselves. This dimension adds a necessary gravity to our understanding of these structures, moving beyond celestial alignments and festive gatherings to acknowledge that the bridge could also be a place of sobering, high-stakes negotiation with the gods, where the currency was life and the hoped-for dividend was survival itself. Beneath the arch of a stone bridge, with the evening light fading and a chill in the air, an entire civilization could be passed from one generation to the next, not through written words but through the spoken magic of a story. These dry bridges became the grand stages for one of humanity's most vital rituals, the preservation of history, law, and identity through the power of oral tradition. Imagine the scene as the community gathers, young and old finding seats on the worn stones of the parapets or the soft grass of the riverbank, their faces illuminated by the dancing light of a central fire. The elder, the Sinchai in Celtic lands or the griot in West African cultures, takes their place, their voice soon to become the sole vessel for the collective memory of the people. The bridge itself was far more than a convenient gathering spot. It was a powerful, silent participant in the ritual. Its enduring stones symbolized the permanence of the tales about to be told, its arch a metaphorical gateway to the past that the storyteller was about to open. In many traditions, the very act of crossing the bridge to attend the storytelling session was a symbolic journey, leaving the mundane concerns of the day behind to enter a space where myth and history held sway. Esteemed folklorist Dr. Lee O'Donnell emphasizes that these events were not passive listening sessions but dynamic, communal performances that actively forged and reinforced a shared identity. The stories told were the DNA of the culture creation myths that explained their place in the universe, heroic epics that celebrated ancestral valor, and cunning moral fables that encoded the society's laws and ethical codes. The telling was an art form. The storyteller's voice would rise and fall, adopting different characters while their hands painted pictures in the air. These narratives were often accompanied by music from a simple flute or drum, their rhythms underscoring the emotional beats of the tale. At key moments, the audience might be invited to join in a repetitive chorus or a collective sigh, transforming the telling into a shared experience. Some stories demanded more, breaking into full dramatic reenactments where younger members of the community would act out the battle of a legendary hero or the mischievous antics of a trickster spirit right there on the bridge's deck, using the structure as their stage. The physical design of these bridges often reveals how intentionally they supported this function. Unlike a simple arch built for crossing, many feature what archaeologists call storytelling seats, smooth, curved indentations worn into the stone abutments or specially placed boulders arranged in a semicircle facing the bridge, creating a natural amphitheater. The acoustics of certain bridges are particularly remarkable. The curve of the arch and the stone walls can act as a natural sound reflector, allowing a single voice to carry clearly to a large crowd without being lost on the wind. This was likely no accident of construction, but a feature carefully engineered to support the spoken word. Perhaps the most captivating evidence comes from the bridges themselves, where the stonework serves as a permanent storybook. Intricate carvings on parapets and keystones often depict scenes from the very myths recounted there. A hero slaying a beast, a goddess bestowing a gift, a great ship sailing to the other world. For the storyteller, these carvings acted as a mnemonic device, a series of visual cues to guide them through a long and complex epic. For the listeners, especially the children, these images provided a tangible connection to the story, a way to literally touch the legend and remember its lessons long after the fire had died down. A beautiful example of this enduring tradition comes from Irish folklore, where specific dry bridges known as Droichead Sealta or story bridges are steeped in legend. It was said that certain bridges were favored by the Owls She, the fairy folk, and that telling stories there, particularly tales of their exploits, would earn their blessing. During festivals like Samhain, when the veil between worlds was thin, communities would gather at these bridges to share stories of the Tuatha De Danann and the otherworldly inhabitants of the land. The listeners weren't just entertained, they were actively encouraged to discuss the story's meaning, to debate the hero's choices, and to extract the moral wisdom embedded within the narrative. This process transformed the bridge into an open-air classroom, where critical thinking and cultural values were passed down in the most engaging way imaginable. The artifacts found near these sites further cement their role as centers of oral culture. While stories themselves leave no physical trace, the objects associated with their telling do. Excavations have uncovered small, polished stones with unusual markings that may have been used as counting tokens for tracking the cycles in a long epic, or perhaps as lots drawn to choose the next storyteller. The remains of large, central fire pits are common, along with fragments of specialized, durable pottery likely used to hold a shared drink that was passed around during the tale, a ritual within a ritual that fostered a sense of equality and community among the listeners. These storytelling rituals were the vital hard drives of pre-literate societies, ensuring that a people's history, their laws, their victories, and their failures were not lost to time. The dry bridge in this context became a living library, its stone shelves holding not books, but the very breath and memory of the community, guaranteeing that every time a story was told, the past walked among the living once more. But the power of these bridges was not reserved solely for the gods of harvest or the spirits of the ancestors. They were also commandeered to serve the most earthly of masters' political power. In the intricate theater of statecraft, where perception often trumped reality, the dry bridge became a potent stage for rituals designed to manufacture and reinforce the legitimacy of rulers. A new leader's first act was often not to issue a decree or lead an army, but to undertake a highly choreographed procession across a specific, sacred bridge. This solitary crossing was a powerful piece of political theater, a physical metaphor for their transition from mere mortal to divinely appointed sovereign. As they stepped onto the span, they were still a citizen, subject to the same laws and limitations as any other, but with each step they moved closer to a new identity. Reaching the other side, they emerged transformed, no longer just a person, but the living embodiment of the state, a bridge themselves between the fallible human population and the infallible divine will that was believed to sanction their rule. This ceremony provided a tangible, unforgettable spectacle that cemented their authority in the minds of their subjects, making abstract concepts of kingship and divine right vividly real. Esteemed historian Dr. Isabelle Dubois has extensively documented how these rituals were meticulously engineered spectacles, blending religious fervor with political messaging. The ceremony was rarely a simple walk. It was a multi-sensory experience designed to overwhelm and persuade. The air might be thick with the smoke of expensive imported incense, burned to attract the attention of the gods and to shroud the proceedings in an otherworldly haze. The new ruler would be adorned in impossibly heavy and ornate ceremonial regalia, a crown that symbolized the weight of responsibility, a scepter that represented their authority to command. As they crossed, they would often pause at the apex of the arch to swear a sacred oath upon a relic or a weapon, their words echoing for the assembled crowd, vowing to uphold the laws and protect the people. This oath was not made to the citizens themselves, but to the deities whose approval was the true source of their power. The public's role was to witness this covenant and then respond with a thunderous, orchestrated acclamation, a roar of approval that was interpreted as both popular support and divine assent. This transformed the populace from passive observers into active participants in their own subjugation, their cheers legitimizing the very power structure they were agreeing to live under. The architecture of these royal bridges was often explicitly designed to enhance this narrative of power and permanence. Unlike a simple functional arch, these were monumental structures that borrowed directly from the lexicon of imperial glory. Some were designed as triumphal arches, their surfaces covered in elaborate carvings depicting the supposed heroic lineage of the new ruler or their patron deities bestowing blessings. Others were flanked by towering statues of previous kings or protective gods, their stone eyes forever watching over the ceremonial passage, visually connecting the new leader to a glorious and unbroken past. The approach to the bridge was often a long, straight processional way, forcing the ruler to walk a considerable distance in full view of the crowd, maximizing the dramatic tension and the spectacle. Every element of the design was calculated to diminish the individual and amplify the office, to present the new leadership not as a choice but as an inevitable, preordained fact as solid and enduring as the stone beneath their feet. A particularly potent example comes from the rituals of ancient Egypt, where the pharaoh's divinity was the absolute bedrock of the entire political system. While most often associated with temples, dry bridges built within vast ceremonial complexes played a crucial role. In a reenactment of a key myth, the pharaoh would cross a specific bridge that represented the primordial mound, the first land to emerge from the waters of chaos at the dawn of creation. This symbolic act was profound. By crossing this bridge, the pharaoh was not just taking office, he was ritually reenacting the very moment of creation itself, positioning himself as the indispensable linchpin holding chaos at bay and maintaining the cosmic order, or mat. His successful crossing was proof of his divine nature and his essential role in the continued existence of the world itself. To question his authority was not just treason, it was sacrilege, a willing plunge back into the void. The archaeological evidence surrounding these sites provides undeniable proof of their political purpose. Excavations near royal dry bridges have yielded artifacts that speak to the immense wealth and effort poured into these legitimacy rituals. Fragments of gold leaf that once adorned ceremonial vestments, pieces of inlaid furniture used for a throne placed upon the bridge, and stone tablets meticulously inscribed with the full text of the coronation oaths have all been discovered. These weren't discarded trash but were often deliberately buried as foundational deposits, literally embedding the memory of the ceremony into the sacred ground to permanently sanctify the ruler's authority. This political function reveals the dry bridge as perhaps the ultimate tool of soft power. It was a piece of infrastructure that could transform a dubious claim to power into a divine mandate, a contested succession into a natural transition, and a vulnerable individual into an invincible symbol. It provided the stage upon which the performance of power could be executed with such grandeur and solemnity that it became, for all who witnessed it, an unquestionable reality. Now imagine the profound, almost primal power of fire brought to these ancient bridges, transforming their stone arches into gateways of pure, transformative energy. These structures became the heart of fire and purification rituals, where communities harnessed the most elemental of forces to cleanse, protect, and fundamentally alter their world. Picture the scene on a crisp Beltane eve in the Scottish Highlands. As twilight deepens, the community gathers at their local dry bridge, a structure that by day seems like just another part of the landscape. But now great bonfires are kindled at either end of the span, their flames reaching hungrily for the darkening sky. The air crackles with the sound of burning peat and the excited murmur of the crowd. One by one, young couples, their hands clasped tightly, make a running dash across the bridge's deck, leaping over the smaller flames that dance along its edges. This is not a reckless game, it is a sacred act. They believe that the fire will burn away any ill fortune clinging to them, ensuring their fertility and the prosperity of their future family in the coming year. The bridge here is far more than a stage. It is a carefully designed instrument. Its stone surface absorbs and radiates the heat of the flames, becoming warm to the touch, a physical manifestation of the transformative power the community is invoking. This visceral, sensory experience, the heat on the skin, the smell of smoke, the dazzling light against the dark stone, made the ritual unforgettable, embedding its meaning not just in the mind, but in the very body of every participant. Esteemed anthropologist Dr. Rafael Ortega's research into these customs reveals a fascinating global pattern where the liminal nature of the bridge perfectly complemented the symbolic power of fire. Fire itself is the ultimate purifier. It consumes what is old, corrupt, or diseased, reducing it to harmless ash and leaving behind a clean slate. The bridge, as a threshold between states, provided the ideal corridor for this cleansing to occur. By processing across it while carrying fire, participants were performing a powerful piece of sympathetic magic. They were physically moving the destructive and renewing power of the flame across a sacred boundary, symbolically transporting purification from the spiritual realm into their everyday lives. This was especially potent during periods of transition or anxiety. After an outbreak of illness in a village, a procession of torch-bearing villagers might walk the length of the bridge and back, their flickering lights intended to literally smoke out any lingering malevolent spirits thought to be causing the plague. During the uncertainty of the seasonal change into winter, fires were lit to fortify the community's spiritual defenses during the long, dark nights ahead. The bridge's solid, enduring presence provided a stable anchor for these rituals, a permanent point from which to launch these temporary but powerful assaults on misfortune and fear. The architecture of these bridges often bears the permanent signature of these fiery ceremonies, etched into the very stone. Archaeologists have identified specific design features that are difficult to explain without understanding their ritual use. Many feature small, carefully carved niches or hollows in their parapets and abutments. These were not structural flaws but intentional fire holders, perfectly sized to secure a torch or a small oil lamp, allowing the flames to be integrated directly into the masonry. Some bridges have flat, altar-like stones extending from their sides, their surfaces blackened and cracked from repeated exposure to intense heat, clear evidence of their use as ceremonial hearths. The decorative carvings also tell a clear story. Alongside the common spirals and guardian figures, many of these bridges feature explicit fire symbolism. Radiating sun wheels, stylized flames, and intricate patterns mimicking the dance of fire are common motifs. A stunning example can be found on a bridge in Gujarat, India, where the stone railings are carved with a continuous procession of figures holding lamps, a permanent stone echo of the living rituals that have taken place there for centuries. Perhaps the most beautiful and enduring example of this practice is found in the Diwali celebrations of India. During the Festival of Lights, certain dry bridges, particularly those near temples or cremation grounds, undergo a breathtaking transformation. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of small clay lamps called diyas are meticulously placed along every available surface of the bridge, on the parapets, along the deck, and even dangling in strings from the arch. Each lamp is filled with oil and given a cotton wick, and as night falls, they are all lit simultaneously. The effect is magical. The once dark structure becomes a radiant river of light cutting through the darkness. This is far more than a simple decoration. The lit bridge serves as a marga or path, a brilliantly illuminated guide to help the benevolent spirits of ancestors find their way back to their homes to bless their families during the festival. Simultaneously, the immense power of the light is believed to ward off any negative forces that thrive in darkness. The bridge, in this context, becomes a collective project of hope and protection, its stones warmed by countless tiny flames, each one representing a family's prayers for prosperity and peace. The physical evidence uncovered at these sites provides undeniable, sooty proof of these fiery traditions. Archaeological excavations around dry bridges from Ireland to India have uncovered thick, stratified layers of ash and charcoal, often mixed with the burned remains of ceremonial offerings, grains, herbs, and in some cases, animal fat. These are not the remains of accidental fires or casual campfires. Their context and composition point to repeated, ritualized burning in a specific location. Furthermore, the very stone of the bridges themselves can be analyzed. Spectrographic analysis has detected microscopic residues of specific resins like pine or myrrh on the stones of some bridges, substances known for their use as incense and their purifying smoke. This suggests that the fires were not just bonfires of wood, but were enhanced with aromatic materials chosen for their spiritual properties, turning the bridge into a massive, open-air censer that filled the air with sacred scent. These findings confirm that the dry bridge was a living, breathing part of a community's spiritual defense system, a place where they could collectively harness the terrifying and beautiful power of fire to cleanse their world, protect their loved ones, and step into the future feeling renewed and secure. While the previous rituals often focused on the immediate needs of the living purification, prosperity, or protection, these dry bridges also served a profound purpose for the past, becoming sacred stages for the rituals of memory and commemoration. In a world without written histories or digital archives, communities turned to these permanent stone structures to anchor their most important stories, ensuring that the deeds of heroes, the trauma of loss, and the legacy of ancestors would not fade with the passing generations. A dry bridge, standing immutable in the landscape while villages grew and fell around it, became the perfect physical metaphor for the permanence of memory itself, a fixed point in the ever-changing flow of time where the past could be touched, honored, and kept alive through deliberate, repeated ceremony. The forms these commemorative rituals took were as varied as the memories they preserved. On the anniversary of a great battle, the entire community might gather at the bridge to witness a solemn reenactment. Elder warriors, their bodies bearing the scars of conflict, would slowly cross the span, not as a practical journey from one side to another, but as a powerful symbolic retracing of a pivotal moment. Their footsteps on the ancient stones would echo the steps of those who had come before them, physically connecting the present to the past in a way that mere words could not. At other times, the ritual might be one of quiet speech. A village elder would stand upon the bridge, their voice carrying across the silent crowd as they recited the names of the fallen, the story of a great migration, or the legendary founding of their tribe. The bridge acted as a natural amplifier and a sacred podium, lending gravity to the spoken word and ensuring that the narrative was heard clearly by all, from the smallest child to the most aged resident. This act of communal listening was itself a ritual of identity, weaving each individual into the larger tapestry of the shared story. Esteemed memory studies scholar Dr. Hannah Klein offers a crucial insight into why these structures were so effective for this purpose. She explains that the bridge functioned as a tangible link to the past, a physical archive built not of parchment but of stone. In the same way, a national monument or a library holds a society's official history, the dry bridge held a community's lived, emotional history. Its enduring presence provided a sense of continuity that was desperately needed in the face of loss, change, and the inevitable decay of human life. By inscribing names, dates, or symbolic events into the bridge's stonework, or by attaching bronze plaques and statues to its sides, the community was making a permanent claim on the landscape. They were stating, in a language that would outlast them all, "We were here, this happened, these people mattered." This transformed the bridge from a simple structure into a chapter of a living history book, one that could be read and revisited with each passing ceremony. We can see a deeply moving modern echo of this ancient practice in the way post-war societies have sometimes reclaimed these old structures. In certain regions of Europe, particularly in villages ravaged by the world wars, a local dry bridge has been adopted as the site for annual armistice commemorations. Veterans, now old men and women, don their medals and slowly, deliberately cross the bridge together. This is not a functional crossing, it is a pilgrimage. Each step is a meditation on resilience, a silent tribute to comrades who did not return, and a powerful, physical symbol of having crossed over from the hell of war back into the peace of civilian life. The bridge becomes a shared, sacred space for processing a trauma too large for words, a place where a community can collectively remember its sacrifice and honor its survival. The quiet dignity of this ritual underscores the timeless human need to mark passage through profound suffering and to find a fixed point upon which to hang the heavy weight of memory. The very architecture of these commemorative bridges often reveals their purpose to the trained eye. Many were designed or later modified with specific features to facilitate these gatherings. Unusually wide abutments or leveled areas adjacent to the bridge provided space for crowds to assemble, suggesting their use as a theater for public remembrance. Some feature special niches or recesses in the stonework that seem perfectly designed to hold wreaths of everlasting flowers, stone urns for offerings, or eternal flames. Archaeologists excavating around these sites have uncovered the poignant material remains of these acts of remembrance, the petrified remnants of woven laurel wreaths, the rusted pins of commemorative medals lost in the grass, and the shattered fragments of ceramic vessels that once held libations poured out for the honored dead. These artifacts are silent witnesses to centuries of grief, respect, and the unwavering human desire to say, "We remember you." Ultimately, these rituals of memory provided something indispensable to a community, a sense of continuity and meaning that transcended individual lifespans. In a world where life was often short and brutal, the act of gathering at the bridge to honor the past gave people a profound connection to something larger than themselves. It helped them process collective loss, whether from war, famine, or plague, by providing a structured outlet for their grief and a way to transform raw pain into a polished story of heroism or endurance. It also allowed them to celebrate their heritage, to take pride in the identity forged by their ancestors' struggles and triumphs. This commemorative function adds a deep, emotional layer to our understanding of these structures. They were not just bridges for the living or the gods. They were bridges across time itself, steadfast sentinels that ensured the whispers of the past would never be silenced, and that every generation had a sacred place to learn who they were by remembering who they had been. Now let the stones themselves begin to move. Envision the dry bridge not as a silent monument, but as a stage alive with rhythm and color, the very air vibrating with the beat of drums and the swirling motion of dancers. These structures frequently hosted profound ritual dances and performances, where the community's deepest myths, seasonal celebrations, and invocations to the divine were expressed not through words alone, but through the powerful language of the body. The bridge provided more than just a platform. It offered a powerful symbolic backdrop. Its arch could frame a performance, representing a gateway to the mythological realm being enacted. Its length could define a processional path, and its solid, enduring presence contrasted beautifully with the ephemeral, flowing movements of the dancers, creating a mesmerizing dialogue between the permanent and the temporary. These performances were meticulously choreographed to integrate with the architecture itself. A common ritual involved coordinated steps across the entire span of the bridge, each footfall a percussive element in the ceremony, the vibration traveling through the stone and into the earth below. In other traditions, the community would form great circle dances around the base of the bridge, their unified movement symbolizing the cyclical nature of the seasons or the eternal wheel of life, with the bridge acting as the stable, unmoving axis at the center of their turning world. Some of the most powerful performances were dramatic reenactments of local legends in which the bridge itself played a part, perhaps as the site where a hero confronted a demon or where a deity first appeared to mortals. By performing these stories on the bridge, the line between myth and reality blurred, allowing the participants and the audience to step directly into the narrative and experience its emotional power firsthand. The design of certain bridges suggests this function was not an afterthought but a core part of their purpose. As ethnomusicologist Dr. Javier Morales has documented, the acoustics of some dry bridges are remarkably sophisticated. The curve of a stone arch can act as a natural sound reflector, projecting a singer's voice or the note of a flute out over a gathered crowd with surprising clarity. The space beneath the vault of a larger bridge can create a resonant chamber, amplifying the deep tones of a drum and giving the music an immersive, almost physical presence that vibrates in the chest of every witness. This was likely no happy accident. The builders seem to have understood acoustics well enough to shape the stone to enhance specific sounds, effectively turning the entire structure into a massive, permanent musical instrument designed for ritual use. We can see a stunningly preserved example of this tradition in Balinese culture, where specific dry bridges known as Candi Benta near temple complexes serve as the dramatic setting for performances during religious festivals. Here, troops of highly trained dancers perform elaborate dance dramas, most famously the Barong and Rangda story, which embodies the eternal struggle between good and evil. The bridge becomes the literal and metaphorical battlefield for this cosmic conflict. The performers, wearing exquisite carved masks and vibrant costumes, use the bridge's length for dramatic entrances and exits, its height for imposing poses, and its solidity to ground their powerful, stylized movements. The performance is not entertainment. It is a vital ritual to restore balance to the community, and the bridge is the essential stage upon which this spiritual equilibrium is achieved. The evidence for these practices is often carved in plain sight. Across many cultures, the stonework of dry bridges is adorned not just with abstract patterns, but with explicit depictions of performance. Friezes of dancers frozen in mid-step with their arms and legs positioned in recognizable ritual postures tell us exactly what kind of movement was valued here. Carvings of musical instruments, long trumpets, frame drums, and intricate stringed devices provide a silent orchestra etched into the rock, confirming that music was an integral part of the bridge's identity. Archaeological digs have further enriched this picture, unearthing artifacts like fragments of ceramic masks that would have been worn by performers, small bronze symbols lost in the excitement of the dance, and the delicate remains of feathered headdresses that would have swayed hypnotically with every turn and leap. Ultimately, these performances of dance and drama did more than just tell a story or please a god. They forged an unbreakable sense of community joy and cohesion. The shared experience of witnessing a spectacular performance in a sacred space created a powerful collective memory, a reference point for shared identity that was felt in the gut as much as in the mind. It transformed the bridge from a static piece of architecture into a dynamic crucible of cultural expression. This function highlights a beautiful truth about these structures. They were not cold and remote, but warm and vibrant centers of art. They supported the arts by providing a permanent, sanctified venue where music, movement, and myth could fuse into a single, immersive experience that celebrated what it meant to be a community, connected to each other and to the stories that define them. After navigating the profound depths of memory and the vibrant energy of performance, we arrive at a ritual that feels intimately human and universally resonant, the simple, powerful act of giving thanks. These dry bridges, so often stages for pleas and propitiations, also served as the heart of communal gratitude, places where communities would gather not in desperate petition, but in joyful acknowledgement of their fortune. Imagine the atmosphere at the end of a successful harvest, the autumnal air crisp and filled with the scent of baked bread and roasting meat. The entire village converges upon the bridge, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of lanterns hung from its stonework. They come bearing the tangible results of their labor, the largest sheaf of wheat, the most perfectly formed pumpkin, the first pressing of cider from the season's apples. This is not a somber offering made from a place of lack. It is a celebratory deposit made from a place of plenty. The ritual transforms the bridge into a communal altar of abundance, a physical manifestation of the community's collective relief and contentment. Here, the structure is not a gateway to another world, but a grounding point in this one, a place to pause and truly savor the fruits of a hard-won season. Esteemed cultural historian Dr. Sarah Jenkins frames these events as fundamental to reinforcing the positive social bonds that held a community together. In a world where survival was precarious, a successful harvest or a narrow escape from disaster was rarely seen as mere luck or individual achievement. It was viewed as a gift, a moment of grace bestowed by benevolent forces that required acknowledgement. The act of gathering at the bridge to express thanks was a powerful act of reciprocity, a societal acknowledgement that their well-being was intertwined with the favor of the land, the weather, and the spirits. This practice nurtured a collective humility, a recognition that their efforts alone were not enough, and this shared vulnerability, when met with success, became a powerful source of solidarity. The bridge, in this context, symbolized the very connection between the people and the sources of their prosperity, a permanent stone handshake between the human and the divine that had, for once, gone exceptionally well. We can see a beautifully clear example of this in the medieval European tradition of the Harvest Home Festival. Following the last wagon of grain being brought in from the fields, a community would process to their local dry bridge. There, a carefully selected sheaf of the finest wheat, often woven into an elaborate shape like a corn dolly, would be presented and secured to the bridge's central arch. This first fruit offering was a direct thank you to the spirits of the field for their generosity, a symbolic return of a small portion of the bounty to ensure their continued favor in the cycles to come. This was immediately followed by an immense feast, a tangible celebration of that bounty. The design of these bridges often accommodated this function perfectly. Archaeologists have identified many with unusually wide, flat parapets that could serve as makeshift banquet tables, or with large, level areas directly adjacent to them that were clearly designed to host large gatherings. The very architecture invited the community to linger, to eat, drink, and celebrate together in the shadow of the structure that had witnessed their gratitude. The material evidence pulled from the earth around these sites tells a story of joyful celebration. Excavations frequently reveal thick, concentrated layers of organic material that differ markedly from other ritual deposits. Instead of a few scattered animal bones from a sacrifice, we find the abundant remains of a massive feast, the bones of multiple pigs, cows, and sheep, all showing the butcher marks for roasting and all from prime, healthy animals. These are mixed with countless fragments of coarse, utilitarian pottery from large serving platters and drinking vessels, not delicate ceremonial ware. In one such site in France, researchers found the remnants of a colossal circular pastry or pie crust, its charred remains still containing the fossilized seeds of the berries that had once filled it. This is not the debris of a summer ritual. It is the archaeological signature of a genuine party, a community letting loose in a shared expression of relief and thanks. This gratitude function reveals a profoundly optimistic side to these enigmatic structures. They were not just places to manage fear or appease angry gods. They were venues for positive emotion, for social harmony, and for pure, unadulterated celebration. They provided a designated time and place for a community to collectively count its blessings, to literally enjoy the fruits of its labor, and to reinforce the bonds of mutual support that would be essential for facing the challenges of the coming year. The act of giving thanks at the bridge was a ritual of reflection, a conscious pause in the relentless struggle for survival to simply appreciate that, for this moment, there was enough. It cemented the bridge's role as the emotional heart of the community, a place that held space for their fears, their hopes, and perhaps most beautifully, their joy. In the delicate and often volatile arena of human conflict, the dry bridge emerged as one of history's most ingenious tools for peacemaking, a sacred stage where sworn enemies could lay down their arms and step onto neutral ground. These structures provided a physically and spiritually designated space for resolving disputes, forging treaties, and reconciling warring factions. The very essence of a bridge, a structure built to connect and span divides, made it the ultimate metaphor for this process. When two opposing parties met at its center, they were performing a powerful act of symbolic reunification, literally and figuratively bridging the gap that had torn them apart. The rituals conducted here were meticulously designed to de-escalate tension and create an environment where cooler heads could prevail, protected by the sanctity of the site and the watchful eyes of the gods believed to oversee such covenants. The ceremonies were rich with potent symbolism, every gesture carefully chosen to communicate respect, equality, and a genuine desire for resolution. A formal handshake executed directly over the central keystone of the bridge was not merely a polite greeting. It was a physical act that united the individuals above the sacred boundary line, sealing their agreement in a space considered holy. The exchange of gifts was another common practice, but these were not simple bribes or tokens. They were often objects of deep cultural significance, a beautifully carved staff representing authority, a woven blanket symbolizing warmth and protection, or a shared vessel filled with a ceremonial drink. The act of giving and receiving these items transformed the interaction from a negotiation between adversaries into a ritual of mutual respect and reciprocity. Perhaps most binding of all were the oaths sworn upon the bridge itself. Individuals would place their hands on the stone parapet or a specific carved symbol and vow to uphold the terms of the agreement, believing that the spirit of the bridge itself would bear witness and exact a terrible price upon any who dared break their word. This divine oversight lent a weight to the proceedings that mere human law could never match. Esteemed peace studies scholar Dr. Amina Ndiaye's extensive research into pre-colonial African societies highlights the profound effectiveness of these practices. She documents the use of dry bridges in Palava rituals, a sophisticated form of conflict resolution still respected in many communities today. In these traditions, respected elders from neutral villages would serve as mediators, gathering the conflicting parties on the bridge. The structure's inherent neutrality was absolutely crucial. It belonged to neither side, ensuring that no party had a home field advantage. The elders would facilitate a structured dialogue, often beginning with each side sharing their perspective without interruption. The bridge's open design, often allowing all participants to see and hear each other clearly, fostered transparency and prevented the whispers and secrets that could fuel further misunderstanding. The goal was never to determine a winner and a loser, but to restore balance and harmony to the broader community, with the bridge serving as the unwavering foundation for that restoration. The architecture of these peacemaking bridges often incorporated features that directly supported their diplomatic mission. Unlike a narrow crossing designed for single-file travel, many were built with unusually wide decks, providing ample space for groups to face each other and talk comfortably. Some featured built-in stone seating arrangements on the approaches or even on the bridge itself, creating a natural council circle for discussions. The carvings adorning these structures frequently shifted from fearsome guardians to symbols of unity and reconciliation. Interlocking knots, clasped hands, or two opposing animals drinking from the same cup were common motifs, serving as constant visual reminders of the desired outcome for any gathering there. These symbols provided a shared language of peace that could be understood by all, even when spoken languages differed. The archaeological record surrounding these sites provides moving, tangible proof of their success. Excavations have uncovered buried caches that can only be interpreted as the physical remains of sealed peace treaties. In one remarkable discovery in the American Southwest, archaeologists found a beautifully crafted ceramic vessel buried at the base of a dry bridge. Inside were two perfectly preserved, identical stone knives, their blades deliberately blunted and their tips broken off, a powerful symbolic act of rendering weapons useless and committing to peace. In Europe, small, folded lead tablets have been unearthed, inscribed with the terms of agreements and the names of the parties involved, likely buried as a way to consecrate the pact and place it under the protection of the earth and the structure above it. Perhaps most poignant are the artifacts that show long-term use, like the stone seats worn smooth by generations of elders who came to mediate disputes, their patient work polishing the stone just as their wisdom polished the rough edges of human conflict. This peacemaking function reveals the dry bridge as a cornerstone of social stability and a testament to our ancestors' deep understanding of human psychology. They recognized that resolving deep-seated conflict required more than just a verbal agreement. It needed a powerful ritual performed in a space that lifted the participants above their immediate grievances. The bridge provided that elevation, both physically and spiritually. It was a tool for community healing, an instrument of reconciliation that used its immense symbolic power to transform raw hostility into a fragile, and then a lasting harmony. By providing a neutral, sacred ground for these difficult conversations, these structures actively prevented cycles of violence and vendetta, proving that a bridge to nowhere could indeed lead to the most important destination of all, peace. Among all the rituals we have explored, few feel as intimate and profoundly personal as the use of these bridges as portals to the subconscious. Imagine a solitary figure, wrapped in a simple blanket, lying in a shallow, sheltered niche carved into the very stone of a bridge's abutment. The night is deep and still around them, the only sounds the whisper of the wind through the arch and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. This individual is not there to cross a physical divide, but to journey inward, embarking on a vision quest or a night of dream incubation. The liminal quality of the bridge, its existence betwixt and between the solid ground of one side and the other, was believed to powerfully thin the veil between the waking world and the realms of spirit, dream, and divine revelation. It was seen as the perfect spiritual antenna, a place where the signal from the other side came in clearest, where the soul could more easily detach from the body and travel to receive visions, answers, and guidance that were obscured by the noise of daily life. Esteemed anthropologist Dr. Noah Williams, who has dedicated his career to studying these introspective practices, outlines the meticulous preparation that preceded such a night. This was never a casual endeavor. A seeker would first undergo a period of purification, which might involve fasting for several days, bathing in secluded streams, or smudging themselves with the smoke of sacred herbs like sage or sweetgrass to cleanse their body and spirit of negative influences. Specific prayers and invocations would be offered to guardian spirits or deities associated with dreams and prophecy, politely asking for their presence and protection throughout the vulnerable night ahead. Often, a small, meaningful offering would be left at the base of the bridge, a personally carved amulet, a lock of hair, or a bundle of cherished tobacco, a gift of reciprocity for the wisdom hoped to be received. Only after these careful preparations would the individual settle into their chosen spot, their mind focused on a burning question or a deep yearning for direction, and open themselves to whatever messages the night would bring. We find a powerful and well-documented example of this practice in the traditions of several Native American nations, for whom the vision quest was a pivotal rite of passage. While often associated with remote mountaintops or isolated sweat lodges, certain dry bridges that stood within sacred landscapes were also recognized as potent sites for this seeking. A young person on the cusp of adulthood might be guided to such a bridge by an elder. There, they would spend 3 or 4 days and nights alone, fasting from food and water, engaged in constant prayer and meditation. The goal was to transcend physical needs and enter an altered state of consciousness where a guiding vision would appear, perhaps an animal spirit that would become their lifelong protector, a symbolic scene foretelling their path in life, or a direct message from an ancestor. The bridge, in this context, served as a physical anchor point for this profound spiritual journey, a known and sanctified place where the community's faith in the process was literally set in stone, supporting the seeker through their ordeal. The architecture of these bridges often reveals how intentionally they were designed to support this deeply personal function. Archaeologists have identified numerous dry bridges featuring small, man-made recesses or sheltered niches built into their foundations. These were not structural elements but clearly designed sleeping chambers, just large enough for a single person to lie down, protected from the wind and rain yet fully exposed to the sky above. This alignment with the heavens was another critical feature. Many of these sleeping niches are positioned with a direct, unobstructed view of specific star clusters or the path of the moon, believed to be conduits for celestial wisdom. The very stones themselves sometimes hold clues. Some are carved with spirals or other symbols representing the journey of the soul or the portal to the dream world, providing a focal point for the seeker's meditation before they closed their eyes. The material evidence left behind at these sites offers a moving glimpse into these solitary vigils. Unlike the communal feasts or sacrificial remains found elsewhere, the artifacts here are small, personal, and poignant. Excavations have uncovered worn, smooth stones that fit perfectly in the palm of a hand, likely carried as comforting talismans during the long, frightening night. Fragments of small ceramic pots that once held water for a final purifying drink have been found, Most telling are the discoveries of what archaeologists call ritual bundles, small collections of objects wrapped in decaying animal skin and tucked into crevices in the stone. These bundles might contain a child's first tooth, a carved bird bone whistle, or a packet of seeds. Each object a deeply personal petition or a record of a vision received, left behind as a sacred deposit and a testament to the transformative experience that occurred there. Ultimately, these dream incubation rituals highlight the dry bridge's role as a sanctuary for individual transformation and existential seeking. In a world where one's life path was often predetermined by birth and circumstance, these practices provided a rare opportunity for personal revelation and direct communication with the divine. They addressed a universal human yearning to know one's purpose, to seek comfort after a loss, or to find clarity in a time of confusion. The bridge provided a designated, safe, and powerfully charged environment for this vulnerable inner work. It was a place where a person could strip away the layers of their social identity and confront the core of their being, using the ancient, silent strength of the stone to support them as they journeyed into the vast and mysterious landscape of their own soul. This function reveals that these structures were not only for the community's external needs, but also for the most intimate internal journeys, serving as silent partners in humanity's eternal quest for meaning and self-discovery. After exploring the profound intimacy of dream quests, we arrive at a ritual that completes the cycle of sacred interaction, the act of blessing. These dry bridges were not only recipients of spiritual energy, but also powerful conduits for bestowing it, serving as hallowed ground for rituals that consecrated people, objects, and the very landscape itself with divine favor and protection. Imagine a solemn procession winding its way toward the community's bridge on the morning of an important journey or the start of a new season. At its head walks a revered figure, a priest, a shaman, an elder, their presence a beacon of spiritual authority. Their purpose is to perform a ceremony of consecration, a ritual designed to sanitize, protect, and infuse the participants and their endeavors with sacred power. The bridge, already a respected threshold, becomes the perfect stage for this transformation. Its enduring stone symbolizes the permanence of the blessing being invoked, while its arch provides a tangible framework for the passage from a state of ordinary vulnerability to one of sanctified strength. This was not a casual well-wishing, it was a formal, potent transaction with the divine, intended to create a lasting spiritual shield around the beneficiaries. Esteemed theologian Dr. Emily Chen emphasizes that this function appears in a stunning variety of religious traditions across the globe, demonstrating a universal human desire to channel divine favor through architecture. The bridge acted as a spiritual amplifier, a focal point where prayers were believed to be more readily heard and blessings more effectively distributed. In many cultures, the ceremony involved a ritual circumambulation of the structure. The religious leader would lead the community in walking around the bridge 3, 7, or 9 times numbers, often holding sacred significance while chanting specific prayers or hymns. This act wasn't just about viewing the bridge, it was about defining and energizing a sacred perimeter, creating a protected zone of positive energy. Following this, the leader would often anoint the bridge's keystone or parapets with sacred substances, scented oils, holy water, or the blood of a sacrificed animal, effectively charging the entire structure with protective power. Once the bridge itself was consecrated, it could then be used to bless others. Travelers about to embark on a long journey would pause to walk across it, believing the sanctified path would safeguard their travels. Farmers would process across it with their seed sacks before the spring planting, asking for a blessing of fertility to be transferred from the bridge to their future harvest. A clear and poignant example of this practice comes from medieval Christian traditions in parts of Europe. Here, a local dry bridge standing near a village's boundary might be formally blessed by a visiting bishop or the parish priest. The ceremony mirrored the consecration of a church or cemetery, treating the bridge as a vital part of the community's spiritual infrastructure. The priest would asperge the stonework with holy water, driving out any malevolent spirits that might have taken up residence. Using a brush or his fingers, he would then trace the sign of the cross with consecrated chrism oil onto the central arch, forever marking it as a Christianized space. Small crosses might even be carved into the soft stone of the abutments to reinforce this protection. For the villagers, the now blessed bridge became a spiritual safeguard. A mother might send her child to touch its stones for protection against illness, or a merchant would make a small detour to cross it before an important business deal, trusting in the divine favor embedded in its consecrated path. The architecture of these bridges often reveals how intentionally they were designed to facilitate these rituals of sanctification. Archaeologists have identified numerous examples featuring small, built-in stone altars projecting from a parapet or set into an abutment. These were not later additions but integral parts of the original design, providing a dedicated surface for placing ceremonial objects during a blessing. Many bridges also bear inscriptions, though not of names or dates. Instead, they are carved with words of power benedictions like "May all who cross this bridge travel safely" in Latin, Sanskrit, or Ogham script. Some feature intricate patterns known as witch marks or apotropaic symbols, interlocking circles, daisy wheels, and pentangles, not as decoration but as permanent, physical spells of protection, carved right into the fabric of the structure to ward off evil spirits and misfortune. These features turn the bridge into a permanently charged battery of spiritual goodwill, requiring only the occasional ritual to top up its potent energy. The artifacts found in the soil around these sites provide the final, convincing proof of their role in blessing and consecration. Excavations have uncovered the specialized tools of this sacred trade. Small, beautifully crafted aspergillums, holy water sprinklers made of silver or bronze, have been discovered buried at the approaches to bridges, likely left as votive offerings after a major consecration ceremony. Archaeologists have also found small stone mortars and pestles, their bowls still containing the residue of aromatic resins and oils used to make the sacred chrism for anointing. Perhaps most moving are the countless small, personal items found tucked into crevices in the stonework. A worn metal pendant that once held a relic, a tiny glass vial that likely contained water from a sacred spring, or a simple stone carved with a personal sigil for protection. These were left by individuals seeking a personal blessing, using the bridge's already consecrated energy to amplify their own private prayers and leave a permanent record of their faith embedded in the community's most powerful spiritual landmark. This function as a source of perpetual blessing underscores the dry bridge's ultimate role as a renewable wellspring of spiritual sustenance for the community. It was a place where divine favor could be not only requested but also stored and distributed, a constant, reliable source of comfort and protection in an uncertain world. The rituals performed there were acts of continuous renewal, a way for the community to maintain its spiritual defenses and proactively cultivate positive outcomes for its endeavors. This transforms our understanding of these structures once more. They were not passive recipients of ritual but active participants in an ongoing cycle of spiritual exchange, receiving blessings from the divine through ceremony, and then radiating those blessings back out to the people, ensuring that the sacred energy flowing through the landscape never diminished but was constantly replenished, generation after generation. When we step back and look at the full tapestry of rituals woven around these enigmatic structures, a profound and universal pattern comes into focus. These dry bridges were not isolated curiosities but powerful, concentrated expressions of a fundamental human drive, the need to infuse our physical world with layers of meaning that transcend mere utility. Across continents and millennia, from the Celts to the Inca, from the Bronze Age to the medieval period, human beings repeatedly chose the form of the bridge to serve as a stage for the most critical dramas of existence. Whether it was a ceremony marking the passage of a soul into the afterlife, a community's desperate plea for rain, or a young warrior's initiation into adulthood, the bridge provided a stable, symbolic anchor point in the unpredictable flow of life. This was architecture in service of the human spirit, a physical tool designed to manage spiritual, social, and psychological needs with the same seriousness we might apply to building a dam or a fortification. Esteemed archaeologist Dr. James Foster points out that this challenges one of our most deeply held modern assumptions, that the primary value of any structure is its practical function. We look at a bridge that crosses no water, and our first question is often, why would they waste resources on that? This perspective is a product of our own time, one that often prioritizes efficiency and material gain above all else. The existence and persistent reverence for these dry bridges force us to reconsider. They demonstrate that for the vast sweep of human history, the most practical thing a community could build might be something that strengthened social cohesion, provided a sense of control over cosmic forces, and offered a tangible connection to the divine. The resource expenditure wasn't wasteful. It was an essential investment in the community's spiritual and emotional infrastructure. The symbolic value was, in fact, intensely practical because it was fundamental to their understanding of how to live a good and meaningful life in a mysterious and often frightening world. This global phenomenon speaks to a set of shared human concerns that transcend cultural differences: the need to feel part of a community, to understand our place in the cosmos, to navigate the terrifying unknown of death, and to feel connected to something greater than ourselves. These are universal yearnings. The dry bridge, in its myriad forms, became a versatile tool for addressing these deep-seated needs. A single structure could host a joyful harvest festival one week and a somber funerary procession the next. It could be a classroom for oral history, a courtroom for justice, and an observatory for tracking time. This multifunctionality reveals a holistic world, where the spiritual and the practical were not separate realms, but were seamlessly integrated into the daily rhythm of life. The bridge was the physical proof of this integration, a permanent fixture in the landscape that reminded everyone of the values and beliefs that bound them together. These discoveries urge us to adopt a more nuanced lens when examining historical sites around the world. So often, archaeologists and historians have looked for purely functional explanations. A structure must be a palace, a storehouse, or a defensive wall. The study of dry bridges encourages us to always ask the ritual question: what ceremonies might have taken place here? How did this structure serve the symbolic and spiritual life of the community? A peculiar arrangement of stones might not be a ruined foundation but the remains of a ceremonial pathway. A seemingly isolated platform might not be a lookout point but an altar for celestial observation. By opening ourselves to these possibilities, we unlock a richer, more empathetic understanding of the past, one that recognizes the full complexity of human motivation and the profound importance of our search for meaning. Ultimately, this synthesis does more than just illuminate ancient history. It holds up a mirror to our own modern world. In an era often characterized by isolation, rapid change, and a focus on the individual, these bridges remind us of the enduring power of symbolic communal spaces. They challenge us to consider what structures we build today that serve a similar purpose. Where do we gather to mark transitions, to seek collective comfort, or to connect with something larger than ourselves? The lesson of the dry bridge is that human beings have always needed and created these places. They are not frivolous or superfluous. They are as essential to the health of a society as any road or bridge that carries traffic. They are the anchors of our identity, the stages for our shared stories, and the silent witnesses to our most profound human experiences, urging us to remember that sometimes the most important journeys we make are not across geography, but across the landscapes of belief and belonging. Our journey across the bridges that never crossed water has uncovered a rich tapestry of lost rituals, revealing how these structures were far more than architectural oddities. They were vital centers of spiritual, social, and cultural life. From celestial alignments to healing ceremonies, each ritual highlights the ingenuity and depth of ancient societies in using their environment to navigate the complexities of existence. These bridges teach us that human creativity often transcends practicality, embedding profound meanings into the landscape that echo through time. As you encounter such mysteries in your own travels or studies, remember to look deeper, asking not just how but why these constructions exist. We invite you to share your thoughts or experiences with enigmatic structures in the comments, and if this exploration resonated with you, subscribe for more journeys into historical mysteries. Thank you for crossing these symbolic bridges with us. May they inspire you to see the world with wonder and curiosity.